I can't see Audacity.
We are ready to get started. I believe that we have a quorum, and are we recording? We are recording. Ms. Pacina, can you please start us off with a roll call?
District 2,
District 2 present.
District 3, vacant. District 4, District 5,
Present.
District 6, District 7,
Present.
District 8, here. District 9,
District 9 is present.
District 10, District 11, vacant. District 12, District 13,
12 is present.
and District 14, and place 15.
I'm here.
District 1 is present. You have quorum, sir.
And District 4.
And District 4.
And District
Present.
4.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pacina. We do have a quorum. It is 9:07 a.m. on Thursday, September 15th, 2022. Welcome to the Dallas City Plan Commission. Again, good morning, commissioners. This is our briefing. It's a time for questions from commissioners to staff. Just a quick reminder that this meeting is online, and we do have subtitles in different languages. For our folks who don't speak English, esta junta sí tenemos subtítulos disponibles para esta junta. Puede prender esta función utilizando el botón marcado con las dos letras de CC que están en la parte abajo y a la derecha de su navegador en WebEx. Pueden apretar en la CC para activar o desactivar esta función y puede escoger su idioma utilizando la flecha desplegable junto al botón. And with that, commissioners, we'll get started with Ms. Seaton. Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. M212033. This is an application for a minor amendment to an existing development plan located on the northeast corner of Northwest Highway and Skillman Road. It's 1.719 acres. It's under PD 742 Zone 1 in District 13. This case was held under advisement at the September 1st meeting. This is to create a dual drive lane for efficiency and to match the new business model. The parking layout and additional directional signage would be included. This is an existing structure with an existing development plan. And there was a question regarding the southern point of the structure. They do have a maximum and a minimum, and the maximum is 25 feet. There is a retaining wall along the drive as well, and the minimum is 15. This is almost to the north of downtown Dallas. And this is the aerial map, the zoning map. And this is a proposed development plan that's in your packet. And this is the area that's referring. And the existing development plan. And staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much, Ms. Seaton. Questions, commissioners? Yes.
This is District
Commissioner
13.
Stanner.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I just want to clarify because Commissioner Young had a question the last time about the corner of the building on the site plan seeming to jut into the drive-through, and you have clarified that, correct?
Yes.
And there was, in fact, either 15 up to 25-foot setback, not a set one. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Young.
And in the same vein, the development plan we saw 2 weeks ago showed the driveway swinging out into the public right-of-way, and the current development plan no longer does that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
This is Commissioner Hampton.
Please, Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you. Ms. Seaton, would you confirm that in the PD conditions, there is a provision for a 25-foot landscape buffer? Is the drive aisle as located encroaching into that landscape buffer?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions? Okay, next case. Just for the record, Commissioner Carpenter is here. Good morning.
This is case M212024. I had briefed it at the September 1st meeting. Do you want me to brief it again?
Can we just get a quick update on that, Ms. Seaton?
Okay. Okay, the question was regarding the driveway, the dual drive, and how the ending of the driveway will be. And so it will basically go from...
I'm sorry, Ms. Seaton, we have not briefed this one, so if you could go
We
ahead and
did?
brief it, yeah.
Okay.
We just couldn't remember, so.
Okay, M212024. This is an application for a minor amendment for an existing development plan for a dual drive-through. This is on the southwest corner of Montfort Drive and Genesis Boulevard. It's under PD 614, Track 5, under District 11. This was held under advisement at the September 1st meeting. This is to create the dual drive lanes for efficiency and to match the business model. The parking layout and directional signage would be added, and the landscape is according to Article 10 and the regulations under the PD. This location is just north of downtown. This is the aerial map, the zoning map, and the proposed development plan. And this is the detail. It's a dual lane going to a single lane, back to a dual lane for the exit. And this is the existing development plan. And staff is recommending approval.
Thank you. Vice Chair Rubin.
Thanks. Just a couple quick questions on the location. You mentioned that this is just north of downtown, but this is far north Dallas, right?
I just noticed. Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks. And just to clarify, the issue with this one was that we had trouble locating the previous development plan, right?
Yes, correct. But
Okay.
we did find it.
We did locate it, and you've confirmed that this qualifies for a minor amendment after reviewing the present
Yes.
development plan. Great, thank you.
Any other questions on this one, Commissioners? Okay. Next case, Ms. Eaton.
Sorry. Okay, this case is M212054. This is a minor amendment for an existing landscape plan that's related to 024. This is at the southwest corner of Montfort Drive and Genesis Boulevard under PD 614, Track 5, District 11. So this is regarding the landscape plan because the development plan triggered modifications for the landscape plan, as well as there are some crepe myrtles that needed to be added. However, there's overhead utilities in that easement, so crepe myrtles were added instead of the larger tree that would interfere with that. So this is located in the wrong place, further north of the star. And this is the aerial map, zoning map. And this is a proposed landscape plan. As you can see, the drive, sorry, I hit the button. The drive is being decreased for the exit to do the dual drive, and then additional crepe myrtles are added on the Montfort Drive side. This is the existing landscape plan, and staff is recommending approval.
Thank you. Questions, commissioners? No questions? We'll keep moving. Thank you, Ms. Seaton. Ms. Moore, good morning.
Good morning. This is W212004, which is an application for a waiver of the 2-year waiting period, which is required prior to being able to allowed to submit a zoning application on a property that has had a council action within a zoning council action within the last 2 years. It's approximately 0.23 acres, and it's located in Council District 6. It's located just a bit west and south of downtown. It's at the southwest corner of North Riverfront Boulevard and Cole Street. You can see you can see those. Here's Riverfront, and here's Cole Street. And it's zoned Subdistrict 3 within PD 621, which is the Old Trinity and Design District Special Purpose District, with specific use permit 2444. So the background on this that brings them to the request for the waiver is on January 26, 2022, Council approved an amendment to PD number 621 and an SUP 244 on this property for an indoor athletic and entertainment center use on the property, and the applicant is therefore requesting a waiver for the 2-year waiting period in order to submit an application to amend the site plan for the SUP to 2444 that was approved in January. What brings them here is that there is actually a minor amendment process for SUP site plans if it does not increase the height shown on the original site plan. However, and because of that, they are needing to amend the site plan to increase the height, and the amendments therefore it doesn't qualify for the minor amendment process. They have to go through the zoning process. And the applicant's statement of changed circumstances regarding the property sufficient to warrant a hearing is that during the permitting phase of development revealed that the proposed height exceeds the height shown on the original site plan. Staff recommendation is denial, as staff does not consider the circumstances regarding this request property to have changed to warrant a new hearing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mormon. Questions? Commissioner Rubin.
I know there's been a request for an authorized hearing on the 2-year waiver standard. Do we have an idea on where that is in the queue for ZOAC? I know they're very busy there.
I will defer to, I don't know. I can defer to Andrea or Andrea if she's on.
I think we're both here. Thank you for the question. I don't know when it's coming back. I know that we're getting the team together. It's going to be a small cleanup item, so probably we'll work to bring it faster, but I don't have a timeline.
It's not imminent in the next few weeks or anything like that, is it?
No.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Warman. Commissioners, we'll now move to our zoning cases. All three cases have been taken off consent. Case number 2 will be held under advisement till October 6th, but all three will be brief today. We do have one speaker in opposition on case number 2 that's going to get held, so let's go ahead and brief it. We'll begin with case number 1, and Mr. Mulkey is online. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. The first case I have for you today is C212-190. The request is for a plan development district for MF2A multifamily district uses and office, general merchandise or food store 3,500 square feet or less, and personal service uses on property zoned in R75A single family district. It's located on the northwest line of Garland Road, northeast of Easton Road, and it's approximately 7.26 acres. Location map showing the property within city limits. Aerial map showing the property outlined in blue. Zoning map with surrounding zoning districts and land uses. To the west is a single family area zoned R75A. To the southwest is an office use zone CR. Southeast is restaurant and general merchandise uses. To the east directly is a child care facility, and then sort of to the north and northeast is a multifamily use zoned MF2A. The property is currently developed with a church. The applicant proposes to redevelop the site with multifamily with a maximum of 300 dwelling units, including 5% at 61 to 80% AMFI in a D MBA area. They're also proposing some non-residential uses, including office, general merchandise, and personal service, limited to maximum floor area of 3,000 square feet. They are also proposing to prohibit short-term rentals, defined as a full or partial dwelling unit that is rented to occupants for fewer than 30 consecutive days per rental period. And with this PD, they're proposing an MF2A base district. This is just a rundown of the base determination that staff did since they are requesting development bonuses to the max height if mixed income housing is provided. So the maximum height in a standard MF2A district would be 36 feet. Staff determined that the base height for this area, considering the surrounding zoning districts, is 34 feet. So with the requested max height of 60 feet, if mixed income housing is provided, that would be an additional 26 feet in terms of the development bonus. With the PD, they're also proposing modified development standards, primarily related to permitted uses, setbacks, density, floor area, lot coverage, lot size, landscaping, and design standards. Some site photos. This is on Garland Road looking northwest at the Garland frontage of the property. Some more views of the front of the property. We're kind of moving to the southwest. Some more views from that portion of the site. And then surrounding uses, this is on Garland Road looking northeast at that childcare facility, as well as some other retail uses along Garland Road. And then we're just kind of going in a clockwise direction around that point. This is sort of looking northeast. At the other side of the street, you can see a mini storage use as well as some retail uses there at the corner. This is the office use to the southwest. Some more views of that office. And these are on Yorkmont Circle looking southeast at some of that single family that immediately abuts this site. And then this is the multifamily to the north. So this is a development standards table comparing the existing R75A with the base district requested MF2A, as well as the standards requested with this PD, which has a base of MF2A. So rather than just have a 15-foot front setback, they're allowing encroachments within that setback through the full extent of the setback. Rather than a 15-foot side and rear setback, they're proposing sort of a modified version of tower spacing, where if a portion of a building is less than 45 feet high, the setback is 10 feet. If it's 45 feet or greater, it would be 30 feet. Dwelling unit density does not come into play with an MF2A district, but they are capping the maximum number of dwelling units at 300, which would equate to a density of 41 units per acre. No real changes to FAR. However, they are limiting, as I said, the non-residential uses to a max of 3,000 square feet, removing the minimum lot size per dwelling unit that would be typical in an MF2A district. And again, like I said, increasing the max height if mixed income housing is provided to 60 feet. Otherwise, this PD, I do not have this on this table, I apologize, but the PD would be 45 feet high or 4 stories, decreasing lot coverage from the 60% standard to 40%, maintaining residential proximity slope, and then in addition to allowing those typical residential uses, also allowing office, general merchandise, 3,600 square feet or less, and personal service. And then I should also mention again that they are proposing 5% mixed income housing at 61 to 80% AMFI, and this is an AD and VA area, which staff felt was appropriate. This is the development plan proposed by the applicant. You can see there are some 2-story sort of townhome structures here along the shared property line with the adjacent residential. That was a way for the applicant to provide units there while still respecting RPS. And then you can see the main 4-story building here, which has some internal courtyards and pools and things like that. This is the tree protection plan that's also proposed by the applicant as part of the PD request. And with that, staff's recommendation is approval, subject to a development plan, a tree protection plan, and staff's recommended conditions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mulkey. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Young.
Yes, Mr. Mulkey, the PD conditions require 5% of units at 61 to 80 AMI. Can you confirm that the applicant intends to build a project in cooperation with the Public Facilities Corporation and has committed to them to do at least 50 or 51%, I can't remember which, at 81 to 100 AMFI?
For that confirmation, I'll bounce it over to Pam Thompson in Housing, who I believe is on the call.
Ms. Thompson, are you online? If not, we can do it at the hearing.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Yes, it's my understanding that they're applying for PFC. Of course, as with all of these cases, it's important to remember that this is a land use zoning case, and the thing that's before CPC right now is whether this land use is appropriate for this area, and the financing for the project, and whether or not there are additional affordable housing units based on the financing for the project is not relevant to the zoning case that's before you at this point. So
but
I'm hoping that that's helpful.
In fact, Ms. Thompson, the council has approved that PFC application. Are you aware of that?
You know, I have, to be honest with you, I have not kept up entirely with all of the PFC applications.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Hampton. We can't hear you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hampton, it appears you're muted.
Apologies, I hit the button twice. Mr. Mulkey, question on the MIHDB following up on Commissioner Young's question. Is the staff's proposal consistent with and again, this may be Ms. Thompson, but is this consistent with the recent discussion regarding the type 3 or the base MIH standards for MF2 district?
Could you kind of clarify your
Well,
question?
is the 5% consistent? Is the 5% proposed by staff in line with what either a base MF2 zoning would be or the type 3, which is intended to cover new PDs?
Yeah, and Ms. Thompson might be able to elaborate, but as I understand it, for PDs with mixed income housing, the 5% in this DMVA area at 61 to 80% is in line with what staff standard recommendation would be.
Ryan, that's accurate. Commissioner, as a reminder, we have the type 1s, which are the base zoning districts, and then the type 2s, which are the PDs that we have, been reviewing for the last several years, and then this new type 3. And those type 2s are still completely a choice that developers can make. It's we continue this creative and individual way of doing zoning, and that's what this one is a type 2 PD. And just to confirm what Ryan said, this is in line with what our recommendation has been for the last couple of years, where in this MBA category D that we recommend 61 to 80%, and we recommend 5% in exchange for the bonus. So this is perfectly in line with the type 2s that we've been working on.
And could you help me understand how the consideration, while I understand that type 2 is available, I think part of the discussion was the hope that new developments would shift towards the type 3 and the 1 Dallas standards?
Sure. In the case here that, and Mr. Mulkey may be able to answer this a little bit better, where the surrounding neighborhood is very interested in being certain of what this development will be when it's done at the end of the day, it's more appropriate to have the very precise language of the type 2 PD where everything is exact, rather than having the menu of options that the type 3 PD would have, where, between the CPC and council approval and the time that you actually pull a permit, a developer in a type 3 PD could choose a variety of additional bonuses from that chart. So in this case, in order to be careful and to be respectful for all of the stakeholders involved, the developer, the community, the CPC council, everybody, this type 2 is an appropriate for this particular development.
I think I understand that, but I guess I would have anticipated that they would have made the selections from what type 3 allows, and that those would be defined within the PD. But if that's not the choice, we can certainly explore that further. I did also want to understand the language, and again, Mr. Mulkey, this is probably for you, regarding design standards. I think the applicant has indicated that their design standards are specific to Garland Road. Staff is recommending Garland Road and open space, but how does that relate to the balance of the development? I mean, is there a consideration of how the full project is intended to be developed in terms of the design standards?
So the applicant's request is for many of the design standards that are in the conditions, like you said, to just apply near the Garland Road frontage. Staff's recommendation is for that, as well as for some of those standards, I think like individual entries from buildings and things like that, to apply to the interior of the site as well, especially where it abuts open space. In our negotiations with the applicant, we weren't able to come to an agreement on those boxed conditions. So that's why there's that difference in the report.
So is it your intent then that by defining it relative to open space, that would cover the full extent of the interior of the site? Not, I mean, I think I read the open space more as oriented towards the north end of the site in Garland Road and not necessarily addressing what I'll call the east and west, but it was your intent that it covered the full site. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I don't think to the level of specificity that you're suggesting. Really what the design standards in this PD are based on as sort of a foundation are the standard the standards within the mixed income housing section of Chapter 51A. You know, we tend to rely on those because they're an already developed codified set of design standards, you know, that were developed through a process to ensure that good standards were provided for mixed income housing developments, but still allowing some flexibility on the part of the developer and how they meet those standards. So that's why I say, you know, we didn't see that it was necessary to get too specific with those standards, but we were suggesting a few more that would still require a high level of design, but again, provide some flexibility.
And so related to that, I guess one question on the proposed encroachments in the front yard. That just seems to be a list with no provisions on either a maximum height, particularly for those that are at grade, obviously when you're on the upper floors. But was there any consideration of giving any further clarity on what would be allowed in terms of encroachments?
I believe the conditions list like some example encroachments that would be allowed.
Well, I'll give an example. I think you allow stoops within the front yard, which presumably would be at grade, but there's no height limitation on that. Is that correct?
Commissioner Hampton, if I may, the applicant's conditions submitted yesterday omit any provision for encroachments. So there will be no encroachments in the front yard.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. I apologize. I was traveling and missed that in reading those. So I think my final question then, and Mr. Mulkey, again, I did see this in the clarification, the open space provisions have been increased in the applicant's most recent conditions. Is that correct?
Yeah, those were sent right before noon yesterday, and staff has not had time to review any updates that were sent yesterday. They were circulated to the commission though.
Okay, and then do you know if that, and I'll read those as well before the hearing, but was there any further specificity to the art park that is proposed, the public art park?
No, not to the best of my knowledge. I don't know if there were any additional language added to more specifically define that.
Okay, well, I'll review those in more detail before the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Mulkey. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other Commissioner Carpenter, please.
Yes, I just would like to add that in those revisions, there was a square footage added to the definition of the art park. I believe it was a minimum 6,500 square feet, and also added a provision that public art has to be provided there, and made some amendments, some more specificity about trees. And it also added some trees on the, is it the north? Next to the daycare center, to the child care center, it added a specific number of trees, and it upped the open space from 10,000 to 70, 25 to 70,000 square feet. I think those were the highlights of the changes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll keep going. Commissioners, the next case, again, will be held under advisement till October 6th, but we do have a speaker registered in opposition, so we'll go ahead and brief today. Mr. Mulkey.
Okay, next is Z212-212. The request is for an MF2A multifamily district on property zoned in R75A single family district. It's located at the southwest corner of Symbol Drive and Amity Lane, and it's approximately 0.29 acre. Location map showing the property within city limits. Aerial map with the property outlined in blue. Zoning map with surrounding districts and land uses. So to the northeast and south of the request area are single-family uses zoned R75A, just as the property is zoned today. To the west are other single-family uses under TH3A Townhouse District. The property is currently zoned in R75A district and it's undeveloped. The applicant proposes to develop the property either with condominiums, which would be multiple units on one lot, for single-family townhouses, which would be 1 unit on 1 lot, although those lot lines can cross over shared building walls. To accomplish this, they're requesting an MF2A district. So I just said this, but condominiums would have all dwelling units on 1 lot. This would be defined as multifamily. Single-family townhouses may be within an attached structure, but each dwelling unit must be on its own lot. And then townhouses would be defined as single-family in Chapter 51A because it's 1 unit on 1 lot. So this is on Symbol Drive looking south, and we're just going to go to the east and around the corner. So this is the frontage of the property along Symbol. And then this is on, actually this is on Amity Lane, sorry, looking west. And then surrounding uses, this is on Symbol Drive looking north, as some of those townhouse developments to the west and TH3. Some more views of those townhouses on the south side of the street. And this is on Symbol Drive looking north at some of the single family to the east and then to the south. So this development standards chart compares the existing R75A with the proposed MF2A for comparison's sake to kind of tease out some of the nuances of the townhouse districts. I included the townhouse districts as a comparison. Yeah, so I won't go through all of this, but the main difference here between townhouse and MF2A, there wouldn't be any front, side, or rear setbacks for single family in a townhouse, whereas in multifamily, there'd be a 15-foot front setback and no side and rear setbacks for single family. Any other kind of development would be 10-foot side and 15-foot rear. No maximum dwelling unit density per acre in an MF2A district. However, the thing that becomes problematic about the townhouse districts is there is a cap on dwelling units per acre, which for this 0.29 acre site pretty much inhibits the property from being developed under a townhouse district. So if they were to request a TH1, they would be able to have 1 unit on the entire property. TH2, they would be able to have 2. TH3, they would be able to have up to 3. And they've indicated an intent to provide at least 4 units on this property. So unfortunately, developing under a TH district in line with the district to the west is not feasible. Yeah, other than that, there are some differences between minimum lot size, same height, same lot coverage, and then MF2A would be subject to residential proximity slopes, which would be triggered by pretty much every surrounding property in the area, so they could not exceed 26 feet in height under the requested zoning district. With that, staff's recommendation is approval, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mulkey. Commissioner Young.
Mr. Mulkey, why not MF1A?
Yeah, so that was one of the recommendations that staff made to the applicant during review of it, just considering the fact that MF1A has a larger minimum lot size than an MF2A. It might be a little more compatible with some of the surrounding uses. That was presented as one of the options in addition to MF2A, and the applicant went with MF2A instead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Commissioner Hampton? No? Okay. Just one quick question, Mr. Mulkey. I noticed on your pictures of your site visit, did one of them include the zoning sign? I saw something a little square white. I couldn't tell. Didn't look like it's the size of our zoning signs, but.
Sure. Yeah, so there is one sign here.
Okay.
And I believe there's another one, yep, on this front edge right here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, Mr. Mulkey, a straight zoning change to MF, I mean, any of the MFs would allow a more traditional apartment complex to be built. Would that be feasible on this lot, given the residential proximity slope, the setbacks, and parking requirements?
Not really, yeah. So that's why staff didn't have a ton of concerns, excuse me, with recommending, I can't talk today, recommending the MF2A. Just for those restrictions that you mentioned, they could probably have something sort of a condominium style building, but definitely not like a full, garden style apartment use on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. Any other questions? Okay, we will keep moving. Mr. Mulkey.
Okay, next case is Z212-241. The request is for an amendment to specific use permit number 502 for a private recreation center, club, or area on property zoned in R16A single family district. It's located on the south line of Dilbeck Lane, east of Preston Road, and it's approximately 12.47 acres. Location map showing the property within city limits. Aerial map with the property outlined in blue. Zoning map with surrounding districts and land uses. To the north, east, and south are single family uses zoned R16A. To the west, zoned, I think, CR, are retail, personal service, restaurant, and bank with drive-through uses. To the southwest is a vacant use that was previously a personal service use, zone PD16. The site is currently zoned R16A and developed with a private recreation center, club, or area. This use is permitted by SUP number 502, which has a permanent time frame. It's been in effect since the early 70s. It was originally approved February 1970, and since that time it has seen multiple amendments to the site and landscape plan and the conditions, plus some minor amendments. If you want the full history of that, you can read the background section of the report. The applicant proposes to continue the use of the site as a private recreation center, club, or area. Also proposing some modified development standards, primarily related to, modified conditions is what I really should say, primarily related to paving, parking, access, landscaping, and some of the standards for the buildings. So since the docket publication, there were some updates that staff did get a chance to review before this meeting. This is just a summary of those that I will include in the briefing so we don't have a really long motion if the commission moves to recommend approval of this case. So since that docket publication, they have added some changes to the plan to increase the height of evergreen screening along the northern property line from 8 feet to 14 feet. Also requiring windows on the north side of the proposed clubhouse building to be 7 feet from the floor, changing the proposed 9,500 square foot tennis building. Now it's going to be a pickleball building, adding some more 12-foot vertical green treatment between structural columns to the south side of the existing clubhouse and utility buildings, and also to the south side of the proposed pickleball and tennis buildings. Requiring a minimum of 3 enclosed walls for these proposed pickleball and tennis buildings, adding 3 additional trees along the southern property line, in the site data table specifying the 2 live oak trees that will be removed. There will be an 18-inch and a 38-inch live oak tree that will be removed from the Dilbeck area of the site. And then some corrections and updates to the parking data table on the plan to match what's actually shown on the plan. There were some discrepancies that were published in the docket. Also to show 2 fewer parking spaces that are being removed because of those additional trees that are added along the southern property line. So those changes are 2 outdoor tennis courts are now 2 outdoor paddle courts. The 9 outdoor tennis courts was corrected to reflect that they will be 9 indoor courts. 4 outdoor tennis courts are now 4 indoor pickleball courts. And then, like I said, removing those 2 provided parking spaces. However, they will still be meeting the minimum parking requirement that they've specified of 140 spaces. So some site photos. This is on Dilbeck Lane, looking south at the main entrance to the property. And then this is just sort of going internal to the site along that existing driveway, which will be rerouted. This is on that driveway looking east. It's some of the existing trees and landscaping. That is in the background, the existing landscape berm that will be removed and replaced with some other landscape screening. Existing parking area as you enter the site. This is a view of the south side of the existing office buildings. This is a view of the driveway that will be extended further east to connect with some of the existing courts on the east side of the site. And this is view from the south of that existing office building. And then we're sort of coming around the southwest corner of the site back to that existing driveway. So some surrounding uses. This is on Dilbeck Lane looking north at some of that existing single family. You can see some more of those homes further east down Dilbeck. This is the existing commercial to the west that fronts along Preston Road. This is the existing site landscape plan. I think it was the last major update was in '92. So this is what's currently on file for the site. And this is the proposed site and landscape plan as it was published last Friday. And then the updated site and landscape plan that was circulated earlier this week that staff did have a chance to review. And this is just a markup version of that same plan showing the differences. You can see the increased height of the evergreen screening here, that note that windows must be 7 feet from the floor in front of this building, additional vertical green treatments along, this already exists, but these southern sides of these buildings along here, additional trees added, and then some corrections up here to the site data table. With that, staff's recommendation is approval, subject to a revised site and landscape plan and revised conditions, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mulkey. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question, Mr. Mulkey, between the existing development plan and the proposed development plan. It appears that the building footprints vary. Is that intentional? Are they filling in? And I'm specifically thinking of the main building appears to have 2 notches within it, and it's just shown as a simple rectangle now. There's a couple variances, buildings that are now connected. Are those being connected? Is there a change?
Let me pull that up again. I'm sorry, could you kind of
So the
point out
building that's
again?
identified as the existing building tennis building, which is kind of the center rectangle, as well as the existing building tennis building to the left. If you go back to the original development plan, the center building has essentially 2 insets in the center, and the other 2 have a building separation. Again, I was just trying to understand if that was intended to change.
Oh, yeah. I don't believe there's an intent to change those. I believe, so the one that's currently on file, you know, is definitely more detailed. The proposed plan, those rectangles, I guess, for lack of a better term, are really just intended to show the building envelope, not the same level of specificity that's included on the existing plan. I've having, you know, seen this on previous cases, I believe the intent was just showing the building envelope is to hopefully avoid some hurdles at permitting. Our permitting staff can tend to get very specific with the plans that are approved here in the zoning team. So I think just showing the building envelope is intended to simplify things a little bit, but still show where the buildings will be located.
Well, and then I would just ask if you might clarify as well on the left-hand side, there's a separation between the two buildings that are shown that is omitted. And again, I'm understanding that they may or may not be looking for that.
You're talking
Correct,
about
right there.
Yeah, I could go back to the site photos. I'm not sure if there's actually a separation between those two buildings. Give me 1 second.
It visually appears from the aerial. Again, it was just a question. Thank you, Mr. Mulkey. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions, Commissioners, before we move on? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mulkey. And just for the record, Commissioners, Commissioner Housewright joined us today at 9:56 a.m. Good morning. Ms. Udrea, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I've never used this table, so it's going to be interesting. Let's see. So today we're going to brief both of the cases in the next time. Is it in the same time? Is it 4 and 5? Z190250, Z201221. There are sister cases, and you'll see in my presentation, as we all know, they are kind of adjacent to one another. They have an interesting history of why there are two cases. And I'll say it for the record, originally when the application was submitted, it was submitted as one case, and it was, I think, 2 years ago. We discovered during the review process that there is a private driveway, internal driveway between them, Orinda Drive, that has a split ownership, and not the applicant could not secure agreement from all the owners that own Orinda. Therefore, you cannot have a PD that's not contiguous. Therefore, we needed to split it into two cases. I know it's been a held over item. We never briefed it, so I wanted to give you this anecdotal backstory of it. So these two new PDs for MU2A base and modified standards for height and additional size design standards, they are currently zoned MF1. They are located on the west line of Preston, north of Beltline. The southern side is over 11 acres, is the one that has the original zoning case number, Z190250, and then the northern side has 6 acres, and it's a newer zoning case number, Z201221. They are located far north, as I was saying, north west corner of Beltline and Preston. It is surrounding, it's a very interesting mix of patterns, and it's a very interesting location. If we look strictly surrounding, you'll see there is in an area of MF, very low density multifamily. It's across from single family that backs Preston. And it's like northwest of an intersection that has plenty of opportunities for suburban type of style retail, office buildings. There's a golf course to the back, and then if we, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the mouse now. So I did a lot of analysis and thinking about how this proposal fits into a larger area and into the area overall. Major thoroughfares, both Preston is a text dot, has a highway standard, as we all know. Beltline is obviously the older Beltline of the city. It's very close to the city of Addison. As we know, Beltline used to function more of a commercial type of, again, restaurant retail. If you'll see here on the left side of the screen, we capture a little bit of the tollway, so it's right off the tollway. So you see, if we zoom out, the development pattern actually changes. You can see what I was talking about, that type of suburban type of development that's on Preston and Beltline. But then if you go west on Beltline up to the tollway, there is a mix of type of development standards and uses. even furthermore, if we zoom out, and this will make sense.
Is your map changing, or is it still on that one slide?
You can see the slide. This is the slide I'm talking about. Yes. So this is, I'm going back, this is Beltline. So if we zoom out a little bit more, you can see here is the tollway. You can see 635. You can see the major thoroughfares and all the quadrants, and how, again, there's a development pattern here with the single-family neighborhoods, but there is something completely different that is happening along the tollway. Important to notice is also there is only 1.5 miles up to the International District, which is the area that's currently zoned into a form-based code, and I will get to that into a second. When we start to look at the zoning around it and zoning patterns in the area, as I was saying, is part of an area that is now MF1. There's across the street from an R75, but then it's a diversity of zoning surrounding it. The SUP that's in the back is for the private recreation center that it's permanent, and it's R16. Other than that SUP, there is no other R16 around it. So there's a combination of mixed-use PDs and then straight zoning, more exclusionary type of zoning. Again, if we zoom out, we will see that the area diversifies a little bit. There's town of Addison that just gets into Dallas a little bit, but you'll see, as I was saying, a combination of PDs further west to the tollway, and then this corridor, commercial corridor that is Preston Line. This is a colored zoning map. What you see in gray, bluish are PDs. The MFs are in orange. Light yellow is single family. It's what I noticed, and again, widening a little bit the angle and looking around it to see how this request will fit in with the trends in the area. You will see the older PDs, right, the PD 26, but then you will see PD 114, PD 614. These are older. They do have mixed-use bases and pretty high heights that are allowed. They're not developed to the full height, but again, the base height, for instance, for 115, which is just west of this area, is 240 in height. If we go down a little bit across the street south of Beltline, you will see PD 272 or 342 that again do have type of base that are mixed use with higher heights up to 135, 180. Especially PD 344 specifies that RPS does not apply. And then now we're getting to the International District that I was just mentioning earlier, a mile, almost 2 miles down the road, or a mile and a half down the road. On Preston, we have PD 887, that's a form-based code that allows mixed uses and maximum stories between 12 to 40. And we all know, like, it's an active authorized hearing, and it's slated to be redeveloped. A background of the case, so the two request sites that are developed with low-rise garden-style multifamily development, that they're totaling 358 dwelling units. Around that, I wouldn't swear by the number. I didn't count the dwelling units. There are 49 buildings, and they're two-story. They're, again, garden-style, surface parking, gated, all of that. These new PDs that are proposed to default to an MU2, but with new and additional and highly enhanced design standards and community benefits to ensure a contiguous and harmonious development between the two and a relationship with Preston Road. The south side, as I was saying, is 11 acres. The change and the request for a PD was triggered by the desire to allow an increased height and in dwelling units on a portion of the site. And then the northern side is just a basic default to MU2, no changes into density or anything else, but additional design standards.
Pardon me, Ms. Soder, just 1 second. Mr. Poole, I think we're getting some messages that we may not be online. Some folks may not be hearing us. Can you confirm?
We can hear you. Yes, I can see the presentation.
Please continue. Thank you.
Thank you. So site photos and surrounding photos, I didn't get in the gated community. I didn't want to intrude, but I did notice that Google Maps does allow, and they did have a drive-through internally. This is the view from Preston Line, from Preston Road. I do want to draw attention to the bus stop that's right there, and it has a stick and a little bench sitting on undeveloped or permeable surface. The sidewalk that's at the curb, again, along Preston. Preston is a major, again, I couldn't say this enough, major thoroughfare that's over, I think it's 115 feet in width. No trees, the fence, the overhead power lines, and the fact that the buildings are basically showing a side to the street, and it has surface parking along the street. Same type of view further on. This is the entrance on Orinda. This is the portion of the internal driveway that causes the cases to actually be split cases. This is internal, as I was saying. I took some pictures with Google Maps. I was looking to see how are the internal driveways functioning, how are they developed, what are the design standards right now, how are the trees looking. You will see the trees are mostly on the building side, not between the circulation and the sidewalk. More, this is Orinda Drive internal. This is internal, just a normal internal driveway. You can see, again, parking in front of the building, a little bit of a sidewalk, and the two-story buildings. Same. Surrounding, or this is the view from Beltline. I didn't want to get in. It's again, it's a gated community. You can see on the left side is the golf course. Further on Preston, across the street, this is the surrounding. This is the back of the neighborhood. I would point to the subdivision wall and the fact that it's landscaped with mature landscaping. This is the terminus point, or this is between, across the street on Preston, there is a portion that's developed with similar type of multifamily and a little bit of an office. It's an LO to the corner. This is the office across the street. And this is the intersection, as I was saying, major thoroughfares. Same retail across the street. Just a little bit, just to put a little bit of perspective onto the built form, this is how it looks right now. As we can see, treed or not treed, mainly, again, garden-style apartments. We call them garden-style, but they're basically surface parking with buildings. Suburban-style development, golf course to the back. If we widen a little bit the angle, we can see how Preston and Beltline, as I was saying, suburban type, wider, larger surface parking lots. You can see the creek in the back and where the golf course is, and you can see the development pattern with the single family on the right side of the screen. But I would point to the fact that Preston Road, it is developed with a little bit higher type of buildings. Now, if we widen even a little bit more and we go into Addison and we cross the tollway, we can see this is basically the development pattern that is across the that is along the tollway. This is where our development is. I did a little bit of a historical overview. I wanted to know, I was under the impression that the buildings were built in the 90s, but as you can see, in 1972 is the first aerial that shows the area being developed. I looked at it. I can confirm those are the existing buildings in the same pattern. So I would say that it was developed in 1972. And then it's interesting to see how exactly this property was the first one to get in, and then how everything started to develop around it. Another interesting thing that I noticed is how the mall actually developed. You see, in 72 there was no tollway. Now it's the tollway. There is a mall here, and then the same in 2004, and then it was demolished. And this PD that I was telling you, it's for mixed uses. It was developed with, I think these are townhomes, but it enables higher heights. So let's get into the meats of the proposal. The land use is that are allowed are the ones that are allowed in MU2. The PDs do in a sequence of revisions to the conditions further eliminated and prohibited uses, and thank everybody for the input on that. There are categories of uses that will be, not entire categories, but the more intensive and car-oriented type of uses are on the list to be prohibited. Now, if we get into development standards, I did a comparison between an MF1 that is on the ground right now, the proposed PD, and then I kept the MU as information basis. On Preston is an enhanced setback. True, on Orinda and Ladera, it is a reduced setback from what an MU would allow or would require, which is 20 feet. The dwelling density, it starts with the same base as an MU. In one of the districts, in the other, it raises the base to 70 instead of 50. So each of the PEDs do have a minimum number of dwelling units. There was a very good addition to ensure that the product on both sides would actually be a mixed-use base residential or more residential type of mixed use. This is a very, very good idea to ensure the residential would be provided. We started with a lower number that would cover one-on-one what is being replaced, but in a subsequent revision, the applicant offered 500 on a side and 250 on the other, so to ensure that at least 750 units will be built. There's a complicated scheme of mixed income housing bonuses that was worked up to last night. Staff is in full support. I circulated the revisions that were sent to you via email as well. The dwelling unit density can be increased per the base of MU, depending on 5 or 10% of mixed income housing bonus. I would also mention that we put the AMFI at 61 to 80 because we considered the fact that the area right now is an MVA category D, E, and F. So therefore, we were comfortable to move the same as the base mixed income housing that is just for that middle AMFI. So FAR is the same as an MU. It just, if you, in exchange of affordable housing, there is no maximum FAR just for the residential use. I would mention that it doesn't mean that there is no maximum FAR for all the other uses. So office, all the other uses do have their own FAR caps. For the height, so this is where the changes occurred. Oh, I forgot to mention that another change that was circulated is the fact that the applicant proposed to have also a condition that says that the maximum floor area for non-residential uses would be 30%, meaning that 70% of the development will be residential. Staff is okay with that. I would prefer to allow more flexibility to go to a 50-50, but it's absolutely perfect to have it 30-70 as well. Now for the height portions, we started with 210. It was revised to start at 180 as the MU base allows right now maximum if it's a mixed use project. And then in exchange for additional, there is an increase in additional affordable housing. And there is an exchange that applies only to height. So basically, the height can be bumped only after the 10% of the mixed income housing bonus. I would say that there's also a new or a different way of doing affordability to ensure that we get the first 10% and don't give the height just for any type of or any percentage of affordable housing. So in your revisions, you will see that the height bonus kicks in only after 10% of affordable housing. And it goes up to 290 only on a portion of the site. What triggered, I think the main trigger for this request to be a PD was the fact that the applicant wanted to have the opportunity to build a tower on the site that is adjacent to the golf course. Therefore, The request is the RPS to not apply from the west, but it does apply from the east for the existing single-family neighborhoods. And there is another box, and I need to mention it. As we know, in exchange of mixed income housing bonus, per our latest revisions to the mixed income housing bonus, the parking ratio can be 0.5 per dwelling unit. The applicant wanted to go to 1 per dwelling unit. Staff disagrees and wants to allow what the base allows. I would also mention that as a first, there are a lot of first design standards that are codified in this PD, for instance, and I will sprinkle and I will mention them. One of the first is the fact that bike parking is required, and it's a percentage of the number of dwelling units. So 10% of the dwelling units will have to be served by bike parking, which is not what the code does right now. The bike parking, as we all know, is required per the percentage of parked cars. I just explained all the mixed income housing. If we need to get back to that, we will. This is for the southern portion. The northern portion is going to do what the same as the base zoning does for MU2. The proposed conceptual plans, this is the northern portion. I am showing in pink. I now realize it should have been probably a different color, different heights that can be reached. So as you can see, and you have them codified as well, there is a linear open space that is proposed along Preston Road that will ensure that the buildings are in the back, and we get a buffer from that major thoroughfare, and ensures a little bit of a better connection or relationship to the street. At the end of the buffer, where the buildings actually can be built per the RPS, they can reach 55 feet. Just as an information point, the buildings can reach 100, like basically in the middle of the site, and only at the end of the site, they can reach 135 or 170, depending if it's a mixed-use project. Now, keep in mind, this is an angle. These are not stair steps, so it doesn't mean that there will be a building that's going to be 180 because 170 in height, because it's going to encroach into the RPS. Now, for the side that goes to the south, that basically has a height plan that's embedded or overlapped on the conceptual plan. I just did a little bit of a mock-up, like if you are to apply the RPS from the existing single-family neighborhood, this is where it will reach and would allow 196 in height. But as we know, this will be revised. The maximum height for this portion is going to start at 180. They can go above that only in exchange for mixed-income housing. The other portions are 90, and closer to the street is actually 54. Proposed design standards, where you can see these little asterisks, is what I think are basically novelties in PDs, but I will sprinkle, and I must mention all the good community benefits that are coming with this request. Minimum 80% of the parking must be in a structure, so try in an effort to ensure no surface parking. Parking structures must be wrapped or screened, and especially around Preston, Orinda, and interior driveways, the parking must be wrapped so you cannot see it. Parking, we have an explanation of what it means. It means that the first 25 feet of the building must be other use than parking. Surface parking is prohibited between the street, the driveway, and the street-facing facade, again, in an effort to ensure that a good streetscape. Bike parking, as I was saying, for minimum 10% of dwelling units in the interior of the garage, secure location. So also, again, where the code is a little bit negligent is with the standards for bike parking. Obviously, EV charging, that became a must in almost all our requests. Micromobility charging stations, again, a novelty. Passenger loading and residential delivery zones, and garbage service loading areas to be enclosed in the building. Let's see. For landscaping, a landscape plan to be, for each phase, to be approved by CPC. A 15-foot enhanced landscape buffer along Orinda Ladera interior driveways. The 50-foot enhanced landscape buffer around Preston, that we call it like a linear open space. Street trees for each 30 feet of street frontage, which is pretty frequent. Minimum at planting 6 feet, which is higher than our minimum standards. Parking lot trees, which is again something that we don't have in our standards. I'm not anticipating any or larger surface parking lots, but I wanted to have this in there to ensure, again, if we have a surface parking lot, we're going to have a tree to shade it. Open space, minimum 20%. This minimum 20% was a labor of a lot of negotiation and discussions with the applicant. So we reached 20% with another condition to say that 10% must be in addition to the linear open space that's along Preston to ensure interior open space. With obviously our standard language that it has to have a percentage to be contiguous, a minimum square footage, which is half an acre. Provisions for open space, which are pretty typical to be mostly permeable, pedestrian facilities for open spaces, a lot of amenities. They have a list and they have a minimum of 8 amenities for each building site. So it's not per PD, it's per building site. Oh, I'm sorry. Sidewalks, very proud of this provision as well. 8-foot clear on Preston with 8-foot parkways. The same or in the Ladera internal driveways, staff is going with 6-foot clear and 8-foot parkways. This is, and I'm pretty sure everybody understands that what is driving staff to start requesting 8-foot parkways is to ensure that the trees are actually placed between the travel lane and the sidewalk to make sure that the sidewalks and the trees also do their beautiful magic into filtering the air and all the qualities that they can get to buffer and safety, air quality, and all of that between the travel lane and sidewalks. Enhanced paving, benches, and trash receptacles for all of these other standards. These are mainly the ones, not mainly, the ones that are for standard for mixed income housing. Pedestrian scale lighting, frontages, 60% of units along streets, driveways, open space to have direct access, typical language. And then another provision that it's half of it, I think half of it or all of it is the first in PDs, and I would hope that we will move towards starting requiring these things. There is currently one or two bus stations along the property, in front of the property along Preston. It is my understanding that with the new DART redo, they are going to scale down to 1. We had a meeting with the applicant and DART. The applicant committed to provide a covered shelter on their property and work with DART for that. And then complete novelty in PDs. Again, I'm hoping we're going to move towards that, and we're going to start codifying this type of requirements to support DART and transit in general. Residential pass program for minimum 30% of the units. Keeps on going to this one. All of this being said, staff recommendation is approval, subject to conceptual plan. Staff's recommended conditions as briefed.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Rubin.
Thank you, Ms. Udrea. There was a very thorough briefing, and you knocked out a lot of the questions that I was going to ask. So hopefully I don't have that many, but just a few things that I want to go over. One, can you speak to how the building site provision is regulated in this? Because building site under Chapter 51A can just mean a lot, right? So could the developer, develop this as a single lot under this as drafted?
I think we took care of that, and thank everybody for that. I think I'm not going to waste any opportunity to advocate for the things that we need to change in the code. So you're going to hear me say it. Yes, this is a slip of the code, the fact that we don't regulate by building block or by block in general. So therefore, when you have large developments like this, you may run into a risk of all of it to be a building site. So therefore, you don't have too many of those standards apply, right? So thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much for all the input and all the hard work. We do have conditions in the PD that says no building site on the property shall contain more than one building of 3 or more stories. So we're trying to narrow it to ensure that each building is going to be a building site. And I think there is another provision that regulates building sites as well. And on the southern portion, we worked with the applicant, and there was a change from the last iteration, the fact that we're showing internal driveways, again, in an effort to show that there are at least 2 building sites to the north and at least 3 to the south.
Great, thank you. And just to clarify, for this building site provision, does a specific amount of open space and pedestrian facilities need to be provided for each building site, or is it just as to the site as a whole?
Just a second, I want to read it. So the interior open space provision, the 10% is supposed to be per building. Yes, a minimum of 20% for each building site must be reserved as unrestricted open space.
And then there's a menu of options of, I think it's 8 out of some number, I think it's 14 or 15 pedestrian amenities. Do those 8 have to be provided per building site or for the whole site?
Per building site.
Okay. And there's that strip of open space, they call it a linear park along Preston. How does that connect to the required open space provisions here?
So that's going to be provided anyway, and that counts towards the 20%, but it cannot have less than 10% interior open space.
But if a building site didn't abut the linear open space along Preston, then the linear open space would not count towards that building site's 20%, right?
That's correct.
Going back to the residential, non-residential split, which I think is 70-30, does that apply per building site as well?
I think that was the intent. Let me check to make sure that I'm... Yes, except as provided in this subsection, non-residential uses may not exceed 30% of the total floor area per building site.
So that area that allows the most height on the west side of the southern portion, that couldn't be developed exclusively as an office tower, right?
That was the intent, yes.
It would have to be at least 70% residential. Okay. I just want to make sure I understand how RPS applies to these two planned development districts. What exceptions to RPS are authorized by the PD ordinance?
I'll share in a second. So let me go back to the zoning map. Per the PD, so the only RPS exceptions that are written are only for the southern PD, not for the northern one. RPS normally applies from all R, D, MF districts, but they are different. So RPS that's going to continue to apply to both districts are from all R, which is this R5. Obviously, MF is going to generate RPS, and you can see on the conceptual plans that the RPS for the MF portion is accounted on the conceptual plan anyway. For the southern portion, the only exemption from the RPS is from this golf course, that's R16, to enable a higher height into this portion of the property. Again, the RPS from all the other sites will continue to apply.
Okay. In the golf course is zoned in a single-family category, you said? What
yes, it's an R16. It's the only R16 in the area, as you can see. So it's basically, you'll see R16 here, that's a lake. So it's a remnant piece, and that SUP is a permanent SUP.
Have you seen any golf courses in the city of Dallas ever develop into housing?
No, but I don't want to make a comment on that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dre.
Commissioner Housewright.
Mr. Dre, you made a statement that I was confused about. On the southern tract, on the 250 tract, what is it in this ordinance that suggests that is going to be broken into 3 sites?
Oh, it's the conceptual plan.
I'm looking at the conceptual plan.
It shows the driveways. So the driveways, I would assume that they will come as an independent building site, each of them.
My conceptual plan has a driveway on the 221 site, but no driveways on the 250 site.
Okay, let me quickly, I'll share my screen. Did it take it? Just a second.
When you say driveways, do you mean curb cuts?
I mean interior driveways like that act like street. So this is the one for the northern side, and then for the southern side is this one, and then this one.
Well, that was not the one I downloaded from the city.
If so, that's absolutely a mistake on my part. I didn't mean to. I'll check on the staff report. This version of the conceptual plan was received before the docket and should have been included in the docket, I think.
And then a second question, I don't think it's clear about the 70-30 split and what you're putting on blocks. I mean, my understanding was you could build an office building, a pure office building on the southwest part of the site, as long as it didn't exceed 30% of the total uses.
I think.
And I've asked this question of the applicant and gotten different answers, and I don't think it's clear. And so I hope as the day progresses, we can make that clear.
Yes, so I think the provision that I just read, the one that for the building site, it says, no building site on the property shall contain more than one building of 3 or more stories. So I would say, yes, they may build a small office standalone, but if they want to go above 4 stories, then it triggers your building site. Therefore, you're supposed to have the 30-70 split.
I don't get it. Okay, are you still going? Okay. Could we clarify this a little bit? Because I met for 2 hours yesterday with the applicant, and I left as confused as when I arrived on this case. Okay. I have numerous questions, but because Commissioner Housewright was talking about that, I want to continue with this particular one, which has to do with that southwestern portion. And the applicant clearly talked about having an office building there with retail underneath. So in that sense, is it saying that 30% there could be retail, and yet the rest could be an office building? Now, we're talking about the site that has the potential of 290 feet.
No, so what it says, except as provided in this subsection, non-residential cannot exceed 30%. So retail, office, both of them are non-residential.
So you saying that they are potentially considering a building that has, I keep doing it. Well, when I do that, it gets worse too. It started earlier today. And you know I've got this southern accent. Oh gosh, makes it just worse. Okay, let's see where we get the best spot. Okay. Am I kind of okay here? Better? Okay, I'm sort of sitting over here. Okay. Now, I don't know why mine's doing that. What should I do? There you go. Oh, okay. Well, I don't have my stuff here, but oh, Lord have mercy. Something about over here. Oh my gosh. Is it my blouse today? Okay. Hello? Let's go back to this one. This one's worse. Okay. Jason, do your magic. Okay. Am I better here? Was that a little bit? Okay, I think that's a little bit. Okay, let's do that. Okay, then my question is, so are they possibly envisioning having 30% office in a 290-foot building with the rest and some retail and the rest of it residential?
They can have 30% office in the big tower if they want to, and then the 70% will be residential.
Well, I will ask ask the applicant, because he clearly said to me that he was planning an office building at that site. Okay.
Again, it can be a 3-story office building.
No.
That's
yeah,
fine.
No, I'm talking about with the big height thing. Okay, I'm going to my next question. If you
Also, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Sure, no problem.
I would also point to the fact that office use is capped by FAR to like, I think 1.6. So they will have caps on square footages. Of course, it's a larger site, and it depending on their building site, because we put a lot of provisions in here to ensure smaller building sites, just to make sure that we don't get an office campus or a non-residential campus when the intent was to have a mixed use focus or heavy on residential.
Okay, now I'm going to go as quickly as I can with my questions. Okay, my next question has to do with that height, okay? And I'm going to put it in a question, which is, why wasn't it considered, okay, that this be MF3 as opposed to MU2 at this particular corner?
Because I think from a planner, zoner perspective, there are a few things with the site. And in general, I think we should start understanding that the city needs flexibility to develop, and we need to look into mix of uses. A mix of uses is not a bad thing. A mix of uses is a good thing that ensures that the needs of the residents may be met within walking distance. So when you have a mega development like that, I would always advocate and recommend a mixed use as opposed to a single use type of product, to ensure that you would have your WeWork if you want to, your coffee shop at the base of your building, to ensure that you have your uses that are supporting your residential within walking distance. So mixed use is actually a good thing for any city and any location. Specifically for this location, we have to take into consideration that these are 2 major thoroughfares. It may be beneficial probably to have a little bit of office or a little bit of retail closer to Preston to actually buffer the residential that may be in the back. And the third point I will make is, again, when you have thoroughfares like that, if I am to prefer between a gated MF3 and an MU that has a little bit of context and treats a little bit differently, I will always take the MU. MUs are also very good buffering with the exclusionary type of zoning districts that are single use. So again, good planning practice, good location, everything points to a mixed use type of product.
In your opinion.
In a professional plan.
And I say that with all respect. I understand you've done a lot of work on this, but given that, I would ask you, I would point out in response to that I don't think every thoroughfare location is meant to have all 4 corners be retail, but I'm going to that with another question. Would you agree with me or concur that where and I wouldn't say the golf course is behind this, I'd say it's to the west of it because it juts up. Would you concur that everything east of that on the north side of Beltline is residential? That it is this cluster of multifamily on the northwest corner. Then it's the R75 basically on the northeast corner. Then it continues all the way to Hillcrest and almost to Coit, that the north side of Beltline from that golf course is all residential, family oriented.
There's a little bit of multifamily as well. We have the Beltline corridor that's a little bit a mix of uses and is the same with Preston. I would point out again, and I would ask the commission, and I would correct that this is my professional opinion, so it's not just a simple opinion. And I would ask the commission, do we prefer back of homes with subdivision walls that will make the thoroughfare more speedy, uglier, unsafe, or would we prefer to start treating thoroughfares as a good location for mixed use and a buffer between these residential neighborhoods? So I think the fact that it is a thoroughfare, both Beltline and Preston, should play a major role in the way we look at things.
I don't have any issue with the linear green space buffering. What I have an issue with is the introduction of retail of any kind into this corner when it's across from major single families, and most importantly, what this site is doing is this is a cluster of many multifamily units. This is not a standalone that it's that whole area. There's essentially 5 other ones that are abutting them. Orinda Drive and Ladera, would you not agree, are shared access driveways that 4 other multifamily, I think one of the best parts about this has been the combining of multifamily with single family at this location. And to suddenly introduce retail when there's no retail from Beltline all the way up to Campbell Road on that side of Preston seems unnecessary. I'm delighted to put new housing there, but I question the thinking that shouldn't this area walk across the street and support the retail right there, or support all the retail to the west?
I would prefer all of them to be mixed use, and I would prefer to start thinking in terms of walkable mixed use. You can never, again, and I will share again my screen just to understand what type of retail are we talking about. If we're talking about maintaining a car-oriented type of development and all agreeing with that, that's fine. A car-oriented development means a separation of uses. You have your multifamily here, then let me share my screen for a second. I put a slide on this just for this. Yes, I hop in my car from here and then I'm going to drive up to here to do my shopping. What if I can actually have a little daily corner where I can do my daily shopping, or I can do my daily yoga, or I can do my daily, I don't know, I'm working from home and I need to rent a little WeWork, and I can rent it in my, like in a walking distance that takes me 10 minutes within my complex instead of hopping into my car or probably in DART to come to this office campus here. So I think it's a different type of development pattern, and we can agree to disagree. I don't think we have to convince each other. Like, I understand.
And I'm not trying to do that. I'm concerned because of the residents. I'm concerned that there are other residents on these shared access driveway that are having no voice in the fact that suddenly, as you enter their driveways on Orinda or you go up Ladera, that they're having the impacts to them. We're making zoning decisions that are impacting immediate residents that intend to live there for a long time. And I'd like to go on to my next question, because I think I'll make a statement. I think it should have been MF3 and not appropriate, because I don't think it's a complementary use. And I am going to go to complementary scale. I do not understand also the staff's thinking on any need, and I have driven back up here 4 or 5 times, driven a 2-mile area. There is not one building within a mile area or towards the toll road that is higher than 12 stories. Not any. And I guess if the trend hasn't started from the toll road going east, why in the world would we go in the midst of a residential area or multifamily area and put a 290-foot building? What is the thought of that, and how it impacts the golf course, the fairways, condominiums that are there, and all the other multifamily residents?
I would again go to my presentation is not the way we looked at it. The way I looked at it is the fact that the heights are progressing towards the golf course, towards the west. So the intent was to actually be very respectful and to gradually allow an increase in height. It is a maximum height, it's not a minimum height. The developer can build up to whatever the market will request or will make sense at that location. The height, the 290, comes in exchange of 15% affordable units, just to give a little bit of a perspective, 15% affordable units, if they are to max out, means 277 dwelling units that are actually affordable units. So it's not a by right, it's actually a bonus. In addition, their by right is actually 180. It's only a low portion of the site. It's recessed onto the western side. Further west, there are PDs that do allow heights up to 240 and 180. So I don't think it's out of scale. The fact that the area is not built with that height right now doesn't necessarily tell us what it needs to happen now. A project like this will take years to complete, probably 10. I would hope that the landscape is going to change in 10 years. I would say, for instance, PD 114 is a PD that defaults to Chapter 51. It was done probably 20 years ago, and it enables heights that are 240 there, but the buildings that are on the ground are actually very low. So I think we need to understand that there's a difference between reactive type of response and planning, and it's a question of what do we envision that this area we would like to become. A mixed use that enables a little bit more height, that would enable the corridors and the tollway to redevelop into a little bit more density, or do we want to be very reactive and say, no, we need to keep it as it is?
Well, I don't appreciate it being couched as reactive. I think there's also in planning a protection of existing. I'm not against change and progress, but I think you also need to protect the existing neighborhood. And if you've got a golf course and all of a sudden you've got a 290-foot building sitting there, and you live in those condominiums, and that, you know, we've got to think about how is this a complementary scale? That's what Forward Dallas says. Is this building a complementary scale east of that golf course? And I see that golf course as a defining line. Here's where we start, multifamily and residential. I see going west of that, correct. That is commercial, but even in the revamping of Prestonwood, they haven't gone above 12 stories. So to start this way east, I don't think that it is of a complementary scale. That's just me. One last question, and this goes to another thing. One of the things that's the most beautiful about this is, and this is where we get into confusion when you have a 10-year plan, but we have no plan. It's like we're doing a plan development without a plan. We have a sort of kind of concept. We don't know as you build one stage how it's going to interact with the next because there's no plan. Therefore, how can there be a plan for preserving all these existing beautiful trees? How can we have any concept? How can we have a concept about traffic? How could you estimate more traffic in an F-level traffic situation when we really don't have internal arteries? I even noticed in the PD, and this is a question, that you mentioned there might be ingress, egress to the site, access from Preston Road, Orinda, or Ladera. Well, my understanding was the only access was supposed to be through Orinda or Ladera. So are we opening the door to that we've suddenly got ingress, egress on Preston, on Beltline, wherever they want to go? I mean, I think we could have achieved the same thing and the same amount of housing and mixed income without going up in the height and without being so nebulous about the plans. But what about those trees?
Yeah, I was going to go to
There's a question there.
I know. I was trying to
Please,
see which was the question.
can you just please address the trees or the commissioners with questions, please, Ms. O'Dea?
Oh, the trees or the streets? The trees?
The trees.
Well, I'm sorry, I am yet to see the tree massing that's existing on the site. I apologize for that. If I'm missing any, there is a provision in there that says that every tree that's 8-inch should be preserved. It's a garden style, beautifully maintained development, but I don't see a tree massing on the site. There are a few trees. They will be assessed at permitting. We have tree mitigation options. I think, and in every redevelopment, the hope is that we will get better design, better trees, better landscaping. So the hope is that with the conditions that we put in place, we will get more trees. The hope is that along Preston, we will actually get that 8-foot parkway with the street trees. I think we put enough provisions to ensure that we will get way more trees that there are in there right now. That was my intent. I am the biggest advocate of trees. I want to start asking for tree preservation plans at zoning, but I don't think that this is a poster child for that.
Okay, Commissioner Anderson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my perspective, I think that what you are presenting and what you've said has been along the lines of what I've kind of been asking for in terms of subject matter expertise and providing a direction and planning from staff perspective that then helps inform where the communities can go, what those options are, and then for us to make a decision on those. Respective to or relative to having retail at the first level, I think that it is it's important to listen to the community and those residents that it would impact directly, but to provide some options because they may be interested in walking across the street and participating in retail as opposed to going further, or they might look at a more walkable situation, or should we include bike lanes in order to encourage a different kind of multimodality? But I think that what you've said and what you're presenting is giving a direction to the area that I think is commendable. However, I'm still on the fence on whether or not it's what the community wants, but I appreciate you moving in that direction so that they have some things to reflect on and actually we can make some decisions on some concrete things. I'd like to see some of the algebra behind some of the decisions that are included that then show why it would be beneficial versus not, or corridor thoroughfare plans or bike lanes and things that show what direction you are trying to push that community into so that then we can make a more informed decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Young.
Yes, I have some questions regarding traffic. Is Mr. Narvaez on the line?
He should be.
Mr. Pepe's indicating he's not.
He's not?
He was.
When?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll defer those to the hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Young. Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Dreher for the great presentation. I'll also commend Commissioner Rubin. He covered a lot of the questions that I had. One thing I wanted to make sure I understood in more clarity is this idea about the building site in the internal streets. I see them located on the development plan or the concept plan, but where are they defined in the conditions? Is there, what would prevent a revised plan coming back through to us that would adjust those and perhaps, not meet the intent, for instance, on the south side of providing the 3 building sites?
So I'm not doing plan review. So if there's some BI person screaming inside, I apologize. It is my understanding that a building site is basically what you're coming with at permitting. The condition, so there is for me to say that I cannot say for sure that those 3, for instance, and 2 to the north, that are divided by the internal driveways are going to be 3 building sites. I think there can be 10 building sites depending on how many buildings they plan to put there and how are they going to apply for permits. There is a provision in the conditions, in both of the conditions under yard lot space regulation. that specifies that no building site on the property shall contain more than one building of 3 or more stories. So I believe the intent was to ensure that the mid-rises and towards high-rises are each its own individual building site. Therefore, all the provisions for building sites would be triggered, the design standards, I mean. So,
well, and I guess maybe I should, because what I was trying to understand is, for instance, if there was a requirement for a minimum spacing between the internal drives as a way to ensure that the scale of these developments would, and I'm going to call it permeability, but permeability in that, residents, the surrounding community could circulate through the site. That seems to be the intent. Is that correct?
yeah, that's my grief on the fact that we should move towards starting to regulate per building block, but we don't have. That's a thing we need to start to explore. So I would not pretend that I'm very knowledgeable and I cannot just pull numbers out of my head right now. Yes, the intent was to ensure that we have more buildings and they would trigger all the design standards. But I don't know, let's say the worst case scenario, for instance, would be each of the 3, for instance, to the south will be just 3 buildings, 3 massive buildings. I would hope not.
Well, and I think I understand where the intent was, but again, I'm even looking at, the applicant, reached out and, shared some of their plans, and, it didn't look like they always aligned with where these internal drives. And so anticipating that there may need to be flexibility, but again, if there was, for instance, a minimum spacing on those internal drives, would that be a way to further clarify the intent that the site is broken down, that we don't create super blocks, for instance? Anyway, I was just wondering how staff had evaluated that and how these locations were developed as they're shown on the plan. But I'm happy to defer that question, because a follow-up I had to that is that in the language on the internal drives, obviously I think the drives will be set as they go through engineering, but if we just said that they're 24 feet as a reference point, and then the conditions require the parkway, they require the sidewalk, but is there anything that talks about kind of what that section would be? Is there an exhibit that was perhaps reviewed with the applicant, or anything else that staff had considered to reinforce this idea of walkability and activity beyond I saw the entry requirements, and I think all those are great. I was just trying to understand what was anticipated to be developed on those internal streets.
So I would go back to the building side for a second, because I just realized if we want the garages to be wrapped, that will push a different type of urban form. So especially along Preston, where their height is going to be capped by the RPS, probably they're going to go to a classic Dallas Donut type of development that will have the garage in the middle and probably some internal courtyards and again, classical Dallas Donut. And I think for that, they will need a bigger block. So I would like to allow them their flexibility, because otherwise we will push them into a situation where they will have to do something that's similar to what's on there right now, because they're capped by the height, and therefore they will be garden style. Again, I hate the word garden style because it implies any garden, but there's no garden there. Like in a garden style is simply a building with a parking lot. So that's why I'm trying to be very cognizant and to allow the flexibility for good design actually to appear. Now for the internal driveways, I was thinking about cross sections, but I'm always would be advise all of us, and that's what I'm trying to advise us as staff as well, to put all the provisions and requirements in writing. They're always trumping the exhibits. What we put in writing is for the internal driveways to have 6-foot sidewalks with 8-foot parkways, and 8-foot parkways, and that's a disagreement between me and the applicant, and I would let the applicant to advocate for their solution as well. There's also a provision of a 15-foot landscape buffer. Basically, in that landscape buffer, you can have your sidewalk and the tree planting zone. per staff's recommendation, the 8-foot parkway means that the trees are going to be basically between the travel lane and the sidewalk, so it's a little bit more safe. It is true that internal driveways will have probably very, very low speeds. So it is true that they can be more creative with that. It is my understanding they intend to make them a little bit wide to allow a little bit of on-street parking, because we pushed the surface parking lots behind the building and we limited them to 20%. So again, we're trying to allow a little bit of flexibility to allow better creativity. I was trying to envision also good design standards to make sure that we get a quality development.
Thank you. So I have two additional questions, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
One is on the where greater height is anticipated, and that's primarily on the southern site, kind of on the southwest corner. That is also adjacent to the MF1 district on the north side and on the west side of that site. In the vision statement, I think I read that the RPS was intended, and again, I understand it's in the vision statement, but is there anything that is requiring RPS to originate from the MF1 on the southern portion?
Yes, the RPS will generate on the MF1. If the conditions are to be read differently, I'll make sure to change. It was not the intent. I think, and I'm hoping on the conceptual plan, we do have the distance per the RPS. The RPS for MF1 is it stops at 50 feet.
50
so
feet.
Exactly, we try to, for the northern portion, they even put their building setback at 50 feet to make sure that they will fully respect that.
And that was partly because when we looked at the greater height, I was trying to understand if staff had given any consideration to, either an urban form, or if you were relying on the RPS to help get a continuity of how, that perimeter might feel, for a pedestrian or for someone along that street.
The intent is to keep the urban form. The PD says except as provided in a section, yard lot space configuration for MU2 will apply. The MU2 base district does have tower spacing, so those will be maintained. And then the RPS from MF will continue to apply, that is 1-to-1, and it stops at 50.
And thank you. You anticipated my next question on tower spacing. And then the second component of that, was there any consideration, I know in some of our other PDs where we're trying to encourage, thinner buildings to preserve light and air when we're considering additional density, was there any consideration of limiting the floor plates to further encourage that type of building form as we look at greater height?
I'm so sorry. To limit, I didn't get the full question. I apologize. To limit
No,
what?
that's okay. It may be the connection. If there was consideration of limiting the floor plate at the additional height to help encourage a slimmer building form to help preserve light and air for the surrounding residents or surrounding properties.
We've used that in some. I have used that in some PDs. If the commission wishes to, we can examine that. I would say that going by code is sufficient. I would try to make sure that we don't run into mistakes or something. It would, I don't know, I'll talk to the applicant.
Yeah. Again, it was just a question if that was considered. Thank you, Ms. Adrea. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, Ms. Adrea, was there any consideration or an attempt to come to a more detailed conceptual plan for these projects? Because the I'll call them sketchy, conceptual plans that we have are forcing us into playing a very complicated defensive game in loading the PD with provisions to prevent, unintended negative consequences, especially when, we're sent from the applicant a PowerPoint presentation that shows a fairly fully realized vision for the development, one that we really have to discount because it's not verified or confirmed that it's going to happen through what we're given in the conceptual plan. So my question is, what happened with getting a more detailed conceptual plan?
Well, thank you for the question. As I was saying, I'll continue to start advocating. There's a difference between what the applicant is showing us at this stage at zoning. I understand that for them it's more detailed, but it's not a construction plan, it's not a permit plan. A development plan is a permit plan. This is to say that we've run into this issue and we keep on running into it every time we approve development plans. I know it doesn't make our team look necessarily good, but it's not a mistake that can be prevented at the stage of zoning. We end up approving detailed development plans and then they go at permitting and they discover easements or they discover they want to change some things and therefore they are pushed into full amendments, adding additional years to their process. So I think it's the same as anything. The code doesn't, for you to develop by right per code, you don't need any development plan approved by the commission. So I would try to say that let's codify everything that we want. Again, text always trumps the exhibit, and let's even if there is something that we can add on the conceptual plans, I would love for the conceptual plans to be more detailed, but to remain conceptual so they can allow them to understand. I apologize. We have cheers.
Getting cheered, Mr. Drab.
Yes. So I'm sorry for my long answer. We've had developments, like in my experience here, we've always had so-and-so. When it's smaller and they're closer to pulling permits, they are more comfortable to submit development plans, and they may not run into issues. I will do a data analysis to see of the development plans that we get approved, how many come back for minors or just for amendments just because something was needed to be changed. That's my long answer. I would always prefer text, and that's how, from a legal point, that's how it works too. Text trumps exhibit.
Yes, I prefer details in text as well, but in this case, or in any case this complicated, I would definitely prefer a much more detailed conceptual plan. We've certainly done it for other complicated cases. I have one other question, and this is about trees. For Mr. Irwin. I see him waiting patiently. Throughout both of these cases, we have a requirement here for a 15-foot enhanced landscape buffer. And, I see that there is now a staff recommendation for a 6-foot sidewalk and an 8-foot parkway, and an indication that that's possibly going to become a new standard for making sure that trees are successful. I'd just like to get your opinion on that. And also, 6 plus 8 is 14. We have a 15-foot enhanced buffer. What are we going to do with the extra foot that we have?
Good morning, everyone. Phil Irwin, Chief Arborist. Can you hear me okay? I believe the 8-foot is superior to most parkways as far as for planting trees. If the intention is to provide a green belt along those roadways, it's the best way to do it. Because essentially anything that happens on the other side of the sidewalk is going to be probably too close to the structures at that point. So I think it's a suitable planting option. In this case, in the PDs, they would be replacing the street buffer zone under Article 10.
Okay, so if we have an 8-foot parkway against the street edge and a 6-foot sidewalk, but we have a 15-foot buffer, does that leave us, 1 foot between the sidewalk and the building?
Well, it may be a small dooryard, or the sidewalk may be wider, or they may do it larger than the 8-foot parkway.
All right, I have one other question about trees, in that the requirement here is to preserve existing healthy trees with an 8-inch caliper or greater that's in this landscape buffer. But then that's coupled with a requirement to plant new trees that are 6-inch calipers. Would it be preferable to synchronize these to preserve any existing healthy tree that's 6 inches? Because I don't really see taking out a healthy, well-established 7.5 inch tree to replace it with a new 6-inch tree that may not survive. Am I missing something here?
Well, I haven't assessed tree survey as to also what will be developed So trying to determine, are there any even 8-inch trees that could be preserved? What condition will they be in before and after construction? Those are questions that, I can't answer. So we're setting a parameters to work within. The 6-inch tree is a large tree to plant. 8 inches are standard for Article 10. So I guess that's just where the numbers come from.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. Any other questions, commissioners, on this item before we join the raucous party that's happening up there at the flag room? Commissioner Kingston, please.
All right, I have two questions. First, I noticed on page 20, the applicant is asking for one parking space minimum for multifamily, and staff is recommending half a space. Can you explain why you recommend half a space instead of one, and how that's congruent with what I've heard staff say in the past, that, if we're going to have no parking standards, we have to trust the applicants to know what parking they need?
Sure, thank you. There is a difference between required and provided parking, though that's the bulk. When we say that we would prefer to trust the applicants, it means that the standard should not regulate, but whatever is the need on the site at the moment of the building can regulate itself very well, like a lot of things that are self-regulated. So no, we didn't intend to open the door for us to start requiring 4 spaces per unit or something like that. The intention was to actually shy away from us guessing numbers, because a building is built forever or for a longer time. So that's, I think it's a little bit of, it's a distinction between required by code, meaning that I'm pushing something onto the applicant even if the applicant is okay with it, and something when I'm saying, no, I would prefer, it's good practice not to start pushing this and letting you have flexibility so you can do in the future whatever the market is going to desire. We need to also, there's a second layer that I would like to add. Parking means that we are requiring driving. So when you require a parking spot, you have to equate that with the fact that there will be a car in traffic. So, and we eliminate the opportunity for a dwelling unit to actually have people that don't own cars, and you're embedding that cost into the cost of the unit. So the conversation that we had with the affordable housing bonus unit, with the mixed income housing bonus when we did the code amendment a few months ago, still stands. City Council agreed to a 0.5 per unit in exchange of affordable housing, and that's what staff is applying. We're not going to bend from a standard that was already vetted and is now citywide policy.
Okay. Second question. You referred to it earlier as the International District. Is that what was the Midtown District that was well north of Uptown?
Yes, yes, yes. It's a rebranding.
Why International?
Oh, I don't know. It's a city council decision. I think it's a rebranding effort. Oh. I don't know. Councilmember Schultz knows, and she can explain.
All right. Well, we'll see if it sticks. Thank you.
Commissioner Popkin.
One quick question. Is there an effort to bury the power lines along Preston Road?
It is my understanding from the applicant that they intend to do that. We cannot require those in PDs because of state law, unfortunately. And I would prefer to, but it's going to have to be a volunteered effort by the applicant. It cannot be a regulation or a requirement imposed by us. It's a state utility company that is regulated by state.
That seems like the biggest impediment to saving those great trees along the Preston Road, and they seem to be really harmed by the fact that a lot of them are planted right under that power line. So that's going to have a huge impact on the intended canopy that's supposed to be really great. I guess it's Encore that owns those?
I believe so, I don't know.
Do you have any idea, I know this is outside of your purview, whether they have any partnerships or grants or agreements to do this kind of burying the electric lines? Or is it fully privately funded?
I also don't know. I would defer to the applicant. I don't even know if it's a land use discussion. I would defer because it's an urban form discussion. From my other jurisdictions, I know that Encore does have design standards or design manual for trails. Remember, there is other cities do have programs to place trails and green spaces into Encore, larger Encore easements. So yeah, it's going to have to be between the applicant and Encore.
I'll follow up with the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stander.
I have one quick follow-up. I want to clarify something because when we pass, this has to do with your parking thing. When we passed the mixed income housing ordinance, I asked Ms. Thompson directly, because I wanted to make sure it was on record. I said, are you saying that bus stops are high transit? And she said, absolutely not. And I remember us having the discussion that Commissioner Blair was so articulate about, that some people do drive, you know. So we came to a compromise. I want to clarify this, and I'm asking you, is this how you understand it? That the half or 0.5 of a parking space was supposed to be with mixed income housing only if you were in a high transit, 1/2 mile of a high transit or 1/4 mile of a high transit area.
I believe that there was the CPC recommendation at City Council. The City Council reverted back to staff's recommendation at 0.5 for regardless of location.
I know that.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Blair.
The parking, and I'm going to go back to the parking, maybe it's me too. If you're requiring a half, and I understand the City Council came back with a recommendation, and I'm following up on the other parking that has been discussed. I just want some clarity. If City Council has come back with a recommendation that if it's mixed income housing bonus, that they only get a half of a parking spot, does this still, and I need to hear a clear definition, does this still give the developer the right to come back and say, at this particular location, we need more than a half of a parking spot per unit?
The required parking is not the same as the provided parking. We don't have, the required is not a maximum. The required is a minimum. So we're saying that that's a minimum required. The applicant, if they need 3 per unit, that can provide however many parking spaces they want. That's what we have in the code right now. We have tons of development in downtown, for instance, that has reduced ratios that are fully overparked per the market. So there is a big, big difference between what's required and provided. We don't have parking maximums in the city, and we're not going into that direction. The minimum is just to, again, to allow the flexibility if there is a building on a building site, because parking is going to be calculated per building site. If one of the buildings wants to be, because that's the market, wants to be parked at 0.5 per unit, they can, but they can provide 2, 1, whatever. So we're talking minimum versus maximum.
Well, when I read this, it says that the staff's recommendation is 1/2 space per dwelling unit is required, not can be, it is required. And the applicant's request is 1 space per dwelling unit is required. If you're saying that the minimum, that there is no maximum, then the wording saying is required to me says this is a definitive, not a could be. So please help me understand.
We will add the word minimum. So it's minimum 1 space, minimum 1/2 per space is per unit is required. So it's a minimum. It's not a can. They will have to provide 0.1 5 per unit. It's not can be, they cannot do 0. I want to be very clear about that.
But if you're saying, and the applicant would then have to be in agreement per the applicant's request that says 1 space can be required, not is required.
A requirement is a must. It's a must. You can have a must of a maximum. That's what I'm trying to say. There is a difference. A requirement is always a must. We cannot put can in PD conditions because those are requirements.
So
they can provide above the minimum required. It's the same with the number of trees. You have a minimum number of trees, but you can provide as many trees as you want.
So you're saying that you're changing to put the word minimum.
Yes, yes, it's lacking. It should be. We will have the minimum. That's how ordinances are written.
Okay.
I'm sorry for missing that.
Okay, and then I'm not sure that I read anywhere or understood the number of dwelling units this particular request is requiring and the number of bedrooms per unit.
We don't do bedrooms per unit because we're interfering with housing and fair housing. So I would like to, again, land use is land use, multifamily is multifamily. We don't want to get into that. The minimum number of units that's in both of them together is 750, but it's also 70%, but it's a minimum number of units.
But the number of, okay, never mind, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blair. Ms. Udare, just one very brief cleanup item before we move on. I also read the boxed items on the parking. Is it not a fact that if the applicant follows staff recommendation, that they can put 1 per unit or 2 or 3 or 10?
Yes, I said that 3 times. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Very quickly,
And
because it's the third round now.
It's 10 seconds. I just want, there's one thing I would like you to clarify for the commissioners in case that there's some that may not have driven out there. That the applicant does not own the retail in front of this property that faces Beltline. Is that correct?
I do not know what the applicant owns, but I know it's not part of this request.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, we will keep moving on to Mr. Irwin. Very important item, sir. Yes, sir.
With me, I'll get us set up.
Phil, can you make sure that mic is on? I'm not sure it's picking you up.
I just picked up. Can you hear me? Okay. I think I'm getting up there. Am I sharing yet? No, don't look like it. Yeah, get me on. There we go. Better. I think we're sharing now. 5. Functioning 5. Mr. Chair, I think I'm ready now. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Phil Irwin, Chief Arborist, Development Services Department. Staff is this morning requesting for limited amendments to Article 10 for the purpose of managing our responses to the emerald ash borer, or EAB. These are relatively minor amendments geared to achieving our strategies to minimizing the damages to the city's urban forest canopy. No, it's not. That one. Maybe harder. Thank you. First, I want to give you a little bit of background on the problem we are facing with the little pest we have out here. We'll cover our purpose of our request and the objectives the City Forestry Task Force is proceeding on with the amendments. I'll also briefly cover the amendments themselves, which are addressing only 4 sections of the code, and then we'll look into the next steps to follow. So the emerald ash borer is a destructive wood-boring pest of North American ash trees. That is, all ash tree species on the North American continent. The EAB is a native of northern Asia and wasn't known to be here until it was discovered in Michigan in 2002. All native ash tree species are susceptible to the EAB attack, and once infected, the tree is likely to be killed within 2 to 3 years. The EAB is a proven and relentless killer of ash trees. We had monitored the movement of the ash over the past 2 decades and watched its migration to northeast Texas until it was found in northwest Tarrant County a few years ago, then Denton and other counties, and then confirmed by the Texas Department of Agriculture in western Dallas County in May of this year. The EAB is still rapidly spreading, and that is the message that we are addressing to surrounding communities. This is the scale of the invasion so far. The introduction began in Michigan in 2002 and has spread over a considerable part of the U.S., causing billions of dollars in damages. Some communities with higher percentages of ash trees have faced the worst of it, as trees are being removed to be replaced with new species, or they spend large sums of money to treat their most vital population of ash trees. Recently, the spread leaped across the country to Denver and Portland area. The ash borer itself is very tiny, but once in a tree, will eradicate that tree within a few years by tunneling and cutting off the food supply to that tree. The City Forestry Task Force, which I in part represent, was formally assembled in January 2021 by the city manager to implement environmental aspects of CCAP, our Climate Action Plan, and to fulfill the Urban Forest Master Plan. The task force includes city departmental forestry managers, communication staff, city department officers, the city manager's office, and representation from local, regional, and state agencies and several local nonprofit groups. We coordinate information exchange, training, and education. And you can find more information on all of this at the city's forestry webpage. Today, the city staff is here to present these amendments for this one purpose of progressively confronting the emerald ash borer. In May, we did release an EAB action plan, which is available at the City of Dallas forestry page. It includes the information presented here and much more on the EAB. I encourage you to check it out at your leisure. The limited code amendment that we're discussing is part of the task force's comprehensive strategy to rapidly inventory our ash trees to find our best specimens, to treat the trees that we can invest for survival, and remove other ash trees as they are infested or in some cases prior to infestation. Our aim is to educate the public and support them in finding help for identifying ash trees and the EAB. We are also looking to find the means of replenishing safe tree species for residential property owners who remove the ash tree on their properties. In order to achieve these goals, we need to make some minor changes to the Article 10 regulations to help support our response to the threat. So we've narrowed it down, the need for amendments to 4 specific sections within the ordinance: definitions, acceptable plant materials, the reforestation fund, and the defenses to prosecution. As a first step under definitions, we've determined we should remove the Class 3 Arizona ash trees from the protected status to unprotected. This removes the tree from the requirement for permit and for replacement when it's removed. Other Class 2 ash trees, including green and white ash trees, will remain in protected status, as some of these healthy mature trees will be treated by our city departments on a scheduled process to attempt to retain them to a full lifespan. As you'll see in the ordinance, the Arizona ash and the yellow highlight will be removed from the Class 3 defined tree list and moved to unprotected list. You also note that the green ash and white ash retain a status as significant for large native trees that reach 24 inches in diameter and greater. Trees that are treated will retain their protected status for as long as we can protect them. Under Section 10.103, acceptable plant materials, we will state that all nursery stock ash trees and transplanted ash trees will be prohibited from being planted in ordinance-required landscaping and also from being planted on city property. We note that these restrictions will not apply to control the nursery industry or private property owners on unrequired landscaping. And in the text, and as an addition, it will state that nursery stock and transplanted ash trees are prohibited in required landscaping or on city property. Under 10.135, the Reforestation Fund, the only amendment to this subsection will be to alter the definition of the natural deforestation event approved in 2020 to include an invasive species which will damage threatened tree species, and to specify the role of the Texas Department of Agriculture in affirming the invasive species and the threatened tree species, in this case, the ash tree. This exception to the Reforestation Fund authorizes the purchase of replacement trees that may be planted on private property. This will help us address our restoration of the tree canopy losses due to EAB infestation. In text, the natural deforestation event is made broader beyond a recorded weather event to include an infestation of an invasive species, another natural event. The original content of the 2020 ordinance will be retained and merely will add to it. And finally, in 10.140, defenses to prosecution. The ordinance would authorize for the removal of threatened tree species, namely the ash tree, that is under imminent threat of infestation to be removed before it is affected by the invasive species. This will allow for our department crews and our contractors to take a more aggressive response where needed to manage critical population areas. It removes the guesswork of being forced to wait for an infestation which may later destabilize and make brittle the tree, making it less safe to remove at a later date that will come. The ordinance already does have defenses to prosecution for diseased and infested trees. So the defenses to prosecution are placed in ordinances across the country to address needs for maintenance and for the health or the death of the living tree. Here, the tree removal application is not required if the tree was listed as vulnerable or threatened or subject to quarantine as determined by the TDA and was in an imminent threat of infestation. Technically, the imminent threat is essentially removed when the ash tree is treated and under direct scheduled care. It will take a concerted effort to maintain these treatments over time. So long as the tree treatments are maintained, the tree will not be under the defense to prosecution rule. So in the end, the City Forestry Task Force and the city staff recommends for these amendments to be moved forward quickly to City Council for approval for the city contractors to be able to work efficiently and safely without code restrictions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Irwin. Questions, Commissioner Young?
Excuse me. Yes, Mr. Irwin, am I correct that the reason we can't just treat all mature ash trees and all younger trees as they mature is, I mean, first of all, obviously expense and logistics, but beyond that, that the treatment is to some degree toxic to birds and other beneficial creatures?
Yes, it can be detrimental to other species that live within and around the tree and feed into the tree. So yes, it would, and that toxin you're talking about will last for up to 2 years, and it has to be repeated into the tree. So it's a continuous expense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stannard.
Yes, this is a curiosity. Have you found any way to treat it that isn't toxic to birds and animals?
Well, there's the way that we recommend, and the way that is that has the best ability to be effective, is to have a direct injection into the tree, and so that it does not impact the surrounding environment. It goes directly into the tree, injected, and goes into the circulatory system of the tree. And so essentially that will be effective for a number of years to keep that pest out of the tree itself.
Any other questions on this item? Commissioner Popkin.
Yes, can you talk a little bit more about the process for, I guess, eliminating unhealthy trees on private property, commercial and residential?
Well, that process is, if the ordinance is passed, then we would be able to list all ash trees as under defense to prosecution. So if a property owner needed to remove a tree prior to or after infestation, they could do so with our authorization without having to get a permit or have to mitigate for the loss of that tree. The function of the reforestation fund would actually be able to help us provide a new tree for private residences only, not commercial. So essentially the property owner would be able to contact us, ask us whether or not the tree could be removed, and we would tell them yes. If we determined after the fact that the tree was removed in our investigations of a tree removal, we would look at that and say it's an ash tree. We don't need to do any enforcement on that.
And what will be the process for commercial properties, private?
Well, essentially, they'll often probably just go ahead and remove the tree, and basically we will not, if there's a required landscaping, we may find that out later and have to deal with a landscape replacement with a new species. But generally, we would ask for all the property owners to contact the city arborist to inquire whether or not the tree could be removed.
So the burden's on private property owners to figure out whether a tree has been infested and whether it's diseased and needs to be removed. If the city determines that there's a tree or there's a 311 call or something, can the city then alert the property owner and then take initiative to remove that tree?
We could inform the property owner to take whatever steps they needed to remove that tree quickly. Essentially, it's going to be part of our education programming that we've already initiated to try to reach out to all the property owners to give them information about where they can find an arborist to look at their trees so they can help assess, is this an ash tree or not? Is it prone to be affected by the EAB? And they can also help make recommendations as to what would be done with that tree.
Great. I know I did see an insert in my water bill this month, so I know you guys are already getting started on this initiative, and I thank you for being proactive for it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter, please.
Yes, I have a question. So, we periodically get landscape plans that we're asked to authorize some sort of amendment to it, and sometimes those plans show ash trees. Presumably, existing at this point, I'm thinking that we probably won't get landscape plan amendments in the future. If this passes, that BI will be, you will be advocating that those ash trees that are already existing be removed. Do we have a role in this in looking at landscape plans, or is it appropriate to ask an applicant at the time of a landscape plan revision to replace existing ash trees?
I think it'd always be suitable to do so. It's within your jurisdiction to do so. We will, in all our plan reviews, if we spot ash trees on there, we'll be looking to seek changes from the ash tree. If it's in the city right of way, we're definitely going to be requiring them to remove the ash tree from the plan and replace it with another. Whether or not that would be a minor amendment process, we may still have to determine that. If an ash tree was identified on a plan and needed to replace it, we would look to want to be able to do it administratively if possible, but if we had to come back for a minor amendment, we would do so.
And one more question, for PDs, there are PDs that have specific lists of trees that are authorized to be planted in the area that the PD covers. And I mean, I know a lot of them just refer back to the approved list that is maintained under Article 10, which is probably the preferable way to do it. But there are some that do allow ash trees. So will that also be addressed at permitting if people come in and don't go through this process? There's going to be some sort of administrative review that allows you to say, we're not planting these anymore.
Certainly, we would be able to make determination per the new ordinance that says we're not going to authorize that tree to be planted in this particular location. The question that might still persist that might need further answer to is whether or not, say for instance, an urbanite ash might want to be planted on private property on the landscaping. Whether or not I would be required to allow for that on the private property under the PD regulation, I would need to make that determination. But if it's in the right of way, like for a parkway planting, we would negate it, but we couldn't allow for it on the city property.
I guess my final question, my plainest question is, would you like for us to do everything that we can do to prevent ash trees from being planted?
That would be most affirmative, yes.
Thank you.
Kind of wraps it up. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Hampton?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Irwin, just follow-up question. This was asked at ZOAC, and I was hoping we might have an answer. Well, I'll ask two questions. First is that there's no requirement for a property owner to remove a tree. However, they would be required to treat the tree if it is identified as being infected. Is that correct?
The property owner will not be required to treat the tree if they chose to eliminate the tree. It's up to the property owner to determine what they will do with that tree on their property. There is a considerable cost that goes into treating a tree for the duration of its life, if it takes that. So essentially, they have to make the determination themselves. The city will not do that.
Understood. And then a question was asked that if a property owner did elect to remove a tree, or if the city removed a tree, was there any treatment required as a part of that removal to help limit the spread of the emerald ash borer?
I believe that would be worked out with the arborist. Generally, we're wanting the trees to be mulched to a small size and hauled to the landfill. So essentially, there will be a process that we will be communicating with the arborist on how that process should take place, so that have proper elimination of the tree waste.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Irwin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners, on this item? We'll keep moving. Thank you very much, Mr. Irwin.
Thank you.
Ms. Skillis. Commissioners, we have an update on the West Oak Cliff area plan.
I guess.
Good morning.
It still is good morning. Andrea Gillis, Assistant Director of Planning and Urban Design. I did want to just provide a very brief update on the West Oak Cliff area plan. Hopefully it'll take about 3 minutes. I do have some PowerPoint slides. I don't know if we're able to project those. Do you have that? I'll give you some background while we might be working on that. I did put them in the case folder, or the slides. So we met last month to discuss the West Oak Cliff Area Plan. That was the last time that we met. I think it was August 18th. And in that time, there has been some movement with some of the members of the community. We had originally talked about doing some more community outreach, having some more community meetings, specifically around the missing middle housing that was recommended in the Tyler Vernon DART station area, as well as in specifically the South Edgefield area. I had spoken with Commissioner Popkin about, maybe we should hold this meeting and speak further with the community. In that time, there were discussions with community representatives, working with some property owners as well, and they actually internally put together some language that they felt comfortable with that would work moving forward, and asked that we actually move forward with this meeting on the 15th, or with this item today on the 15th. So because of that, we have decided to proceed with the item today. And come to you with some additional information. That's not to say that we are not going to continue to have additional community outreach. I think there's still a lot of work to be done when we start getting into some specific zoning details. But for specific to this plan and the guidance, working with different community representatives, organizations, we did come up with some adjusted language that we are proposing today for your consideration, that the community is also supportive in this area, and they feel that they can support the plan and the recommendations in the plan if this language is to be considered by you all. It should be it's actually slide 2, and you all did receive an email on this morning. So within that email of the proposed motion from the Commissioner Popkin, it's the first page of the motion. It's that language, and it replaces, there's been a lot of discussion about text on page 122. We've gone back and forth a lot on this text. So I think we've reached a conclusion. I think it covers a lot of what we've been talking about, that again, we do need some additional engagement. There is some opening for some different housing types, but with the caveat that people would feel more comfortable about it if we had more discussions about it in the future as we start to go through the zoning process and consider that. So I just wanted to point that out. We can bring this up to this afternoon. I wanted to point it out because we did tell community members that we would bring this forward before the public hearing, so they could feel some assurance that this language was being put into the record and it would be considered today. And I also just wanted to preemptively bring it to your attention and just kind of give you a little bit of background on where we're at with that and why we're recommending that we proceed forward with the meeting today. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. You all have the details of the text. If there's any details about that you have questions on, I'm happy to answer it, or we can discuss it further this afternoon at the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Commissioner Popka.
I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to make it brief. I wanted to start out by just clarifying, have any edits been made to this document since it left the subcommittee club? I know we've had a lot of discussions about different things that need changing. Where are we at now?
So the changes that were recommended through club and that were agreed upon at the time of club through that motion have been made. So the auto-centric business uses, those changes have been made in the document, and that's reflected in the July 1st document. However, these other changes that the CPC has been discussing, because we haven't had a motion on them or we haven't agreed upon a motion, those changes have not yet been made.
Okay, so that explains why my motion needs to be as long as it is, because we've talked about a lot of things that need, little things that need to be updated in the document. Secondly, regarding engagement in the process, what are the plans for future engagement, especially regarding South Edgefield? Have you guys set a date for any further meetings? Are there any further plans with other neighborhoods to continue this process?
We haven't set a date yet, but in fact, this morning I was just emailing back and forth with somebody in the community and talking about different opportunities for additional engagement and work moving forward. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity through this process, through subsequent authorized hearing processes, either ones that are already in motion or ones that are to be considered. And then two, I think, just through Forward Dallas as well, because we want to, in general, be talking about one of the big topics through that process is talking about missing middle and what that means and what it looks like and what it feels like.
Are there any dates planned or events scheduled yet to circle up with these neighborhoods?
We don't have any dates yet.
Okay.
But we were happy to work on those.
And it's my understanding that there are a couple neighborhoods that have come forward to initiate the conservation district process and decide whether that's the right process for them. I was also contacted by the Jimtown Neighborhood Association, which is interested in talking about that at their next meeting, and the Beverly Hills Neighborhood Association has started to identify the PD process as one that they'd like to move forward with. What should be my recommendation to these neighbors as they look into these different tools and decide what the next steps need to be?
To directly reach out to staff, sort of outside of all of this, to directly reach out to staff. And I know that some of them have already reached out to our neighborhood conservation district manager, staff person, who have started those conversations. And, for those other items, we can talk about those as well. Or for the other neighborhoods, we can talk about how we start the orientation process about what all of that entails.
How is that included in the purview of the department? Do you guys have funding and staffing available to continue? I mean, say if I recommended that we had 15 areas in this neighborhood that need further conversation about what a PD overlay might look like, that's a lot of work. How does that fit into?
Well, I think we first need to think about, the assumption is that you need a PD, right? We have a lot of tools to look at. We also need to fully understand all of the issues, because I think right now there's a lot of discussion how zoning is going to basically solve everything. And zoning may not necessarily be this tool that's going to solve everything. So I think we really need to have a conversation about what might be the best tool. No, do we have staff to start 15 PDs tomorrow? We don't. So in the interim, if that's the way to go, or if zoning is the way to go, we have to think about that and have conversation about what's a realistic timeline for that and what we're looking at moving forward. Because obviously West Oak Cliff isn't the only area that we're working in. We're getting requests citywide, so have to take those into consideration.
Okay, so let me circle back to the South Edgefield neighborhood specifically, knowing that there's not an existing authorized hearing for that neighborhood.
Right.
What would you recommend as their next step in potentially codifying some of this zoning that has come up in these recent conversations and reflecting the language that we've put together for them?
I think we have to bring a team of staff together, because I know that there's been discussions about a conservation district. There's been discussion about a neighborhood stabilization overlay. There's been a talk about just, some housing options, some housing program options. I think we need to think about that as well. There's been discussions about, different infrastructure programs and programs that maybe not even are accessible yet within the city. Do we create new programs? All of those things I think we need to meet and really start having those sort of core meetings to think about implementation. The issue is we're in the planning phase right now. We haven't been able to get out of the planning phase to start getting into the implementation phase. So until that's settled, it's hard for us to jump the gun on the implementation phase.
So if the South Edgefield neighborhood decided that they wanted to initiate an authorized hearing, that could be staff directed or neighborhood directed?
Yes.
Okay. Oh my God, I have so many questions. I'm trying to figure out which one I should ask next. So let's jump into some of the easier questions. I think we can just bust through real quick. So you mentioned that delaying this kind of prolongs this process. Would a delay in this cause more delay for neighbors who are awaiting these authorized hearings to go through? Is that also?
Yeah, because right now they're sitting on the list of authorized hearings. We've got them queued up as, within the West Oak Cliff area plan, but they're scored as having no plan in place. So they're behind many different cases. So yes, I mean, as soon as there is an area plan that is adopted for this area, they jump up in the line. And we've kind of been waiting for that to happen. And it doesn't happen until this plan gets adopted.
Just, do you have any idea how long we've been waiting for an authorized hearing in places, for example, like the Gemtown neighborhood, where it's got single-family homes accidentally somehow with MF2 zoning? We've got the Elmwood neighborhood downtown that's been waiting for parking regulations and use regulations to allow these historic buildings to, redevelop and have businesses in them finally after decades of neglect. Same with the North Cliff neighborhood. Do you know how long these property owners and business owners have been waiting for these authorized hearings?
Yeah, these authorized hearings have been, Elmwood was authorized in 2017. Edgefield, Clarendon Trolley Stop area was 2018, Clarendon Hampton 2019, Hampton Clarendon Trolley Stop area 2019. So there's, it's been 2017, 2018, 2019.
Okay, so that explains why I've been getting pinged by folks that are anxious for this to go forward. I was just combing through my emails to make sure I caught them all, and just sent you guys another one that I received from a neighbor that said, please don't deny this, delay this any further. We've got to get going on these, and we're excited about what the plan has in them. Do you, as a staff member, being familiar with this process, feel like the plan addresses the nuisance uses along the Davis Street corridor that neighbors have expressed concerns about in that authorized hearing?
Yes, I think those issues have been resolved.
Okay, and does the plan satisfactorily resolve the issues in the downtown Elmwood part of their Elmwood neighborhood that requires some use and parking changes as well?
Yeah, there's a significant series of recommendations included for that area that we could start looking at for through the plan.
And was there any concern about what's recommended for the North Cliff neighborhood and the parking and use changes that are required to put some businesses in those old buildings as well?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check in with you on that and put those on the public record. And how would you say the Hampton Clarendon changes reflect the neighbors' concerns about residential proximity slope and the potential for redevelopment for some of those vacant lots and service parking lots?
So there is the recommendation for to employ the residential proximity slope, that would still stay in place. There are recommendations, there's some language that touch upon neighborhood context sensitive approaches, and making sure that any redevelopment takes into consideration the surrounding area and making sure that it's sensitive to the surrounding area.
And I'm remembering some meetings in specific where there were images of different types of development that could be recommended, and neighbors were being asked to vote on which ones. Were there any of those uses that you remember neighbors saying, actually, this is not something that we want for this area?
I don't remember that. I just don't remember that meeting.
I know we had a similar conversation about the Hampton Station area.
Yeah, and I know there were preference, a lot of different boards that were provided. There were preference analysis surveys done, development preference surveys, and out of that, that's where the recommendations were in part developed.
Okay, and I do remember one conversation with a number of residents about the height allowed in these specific areas where it may be appropriate to have some more height and density, especially mixed use with living above retail on the bottom. And it seems like we reached a resolution where, although the height may be, there is currently allowed,
Right.
I think it's a 50-foot.
I think it's 54 that's currently allowed.
And so in this recommendation, that is actually capped because of the residential proximity.
Exactly.
That's requested in this
And
area
this-
plan,
and the
but
plan
not as part of
spec-
the current zoning.
Exactly, and the plan specifically states that that should be honored to make sure that any new development fits in context with the area.
So that really kind of fixes that potential redevelopment issue that exists currently.
It provides that guidance that should be a priority for redevelopment, yes.
Okay, great. And so I've got some folks asking me, what is the timeline on these authorized hearings? Once WOCAP is finalized, what processes then begin for these 5 different, how do we prioritize these 5 hearings?
Right, so they will move to the top of the list. Now, currently, we have several authorized hearings that are underway. We actually just kicked off a process for another one this past Monday. So we will need to, if this gets adopted, we will need to sit down and hash out the process moving forward, because these will move to the top of the list underneath those that are currently underway. So we should have that, we'll have that information. We understand that this is a priority for the area, and we will work as expeditiously as we can within the staff that we have.
So my understanding is part of the reason we're here is because these authorized hearings were waiting in the queue, and staff or the city changed the policy so that if an authorized hearing is in an area with an area plan, then they get moved up to the top of the list. So that was the primary reason for creating an area plan this large, was to encompass as many of these lingering authorized hearings as possible in this neighborhood that hasn't gotten much attention at all in the last few decades. So this is kind of a first initiative to get those going. How else are authorized hearings prioritized? What other, is it by, who submitted it first?
So we're working on updating that policy. So that policy that's in place, it's about 2.5 years old at this point. Some of the other things that were included, if you're in a TIF district, if you're in a neighborhood empowerment zone, which is being proposed for this area, or for parts of this area, if you're in other city-initiated program areas, you can get a certain amount of additional points. We are working on a process to update how these requests get prioritized, because what we're seeing is that the scoring as it was based on what was known 2.5 years ago, we weren't necessarily thinking about environmental justice issues. We weren't necessarily prioritizing housing attainability, and if we have some serious displacement issues and things like that. So we want to make sure that that gets incorporated moving forward into sort of the prioritization process for new authorized hearings. And I will say that with an area plan, I think that there are some concerns that we've got some authorized hearings that have taken, 1.5 years, or they've been pretty long. The benefit, if you've just gone through an area plan, is all of this work is fresh. The recommendations for these areas are fresh, and a lot of the bulk of that work, that initial analysis, has been done so that we can really get into starting to talk about the nitty-gritty of the zoning without having to do that really extensive background analysis first.
And I have to applaud y'all's work at creating new neighborhood associations. That will make it a lot quicker. So that's good to hear that this will feed into hopefully a quicker process once those authorized hearings are begun. But it sounds like that it could potentially be a year and a half, 2 years from now before we even start to see these authorized hearings.
I would say we would be starting before that, but maybe some of them may not be concluding. They'll be staggered. We won't be able to start all 5 at the same time. Or I would be highly surprised if we can figure out how to work that out. But you could see some of them concluding within that time, sure.
And so quickly, regarding the 7 focus areas, how were those additional 2 areas identified?
That was part of from what I understand, that was really part of working with the task force and just, the back and forth dialogue, understanding sort of some of the issues that were being developed through task force conversations and then going out to the community. So it was really an iterative process while, doing the engagement through the various different means throughout the planning process.
And so knowing now that there is not a current authorized hearing or zoning request for areas around those 2 stations and also along the Davis Street corridor, that although there are focus areas in this plan, there's not currently a plan to make any changes in the zoning there.
Right. Unless it's initiated through, as they usually are initiated, either through CPC, 3-signature memo, council, 5-signature memo, or, we start having those discussions with community residents.
So can you just explain to us what is the benefit of putting forward an authorized hearing that could take 5 years to really get through versus a single property owner coming forward with a zoning request?
It's a really hard one. So when you have plan guidance, when you have an adopted plan with guidance, sort of having some piecemeal zoning changes that are just property by property maybe aren't as scary to the community or to surrounding residents or businesses because you have sort of some predictive guidance. I think at any time, an individual property owner can come in to request a zoning change. I mean, that's always available, even if there is an authorized hearing on the books. I would say that we are hoping to change the situation where there is a 5-year wait for an authorized hearing for a larger area. The benefit to doing the larger area is obviously you're doing simultaneous planning with it. You're thinking about the bigger picture and how any individual zoning will impact the bigger picture in the bigger area. And you can get more people involved in the discussion and thinking about it. So that's really one of the benefits of sort of the bigger authorized hearing process. Although if you have already existing plan guidance, but we know that many of the areas of the city don't have that, when you do have the piecemeal rezoning, it can be angsty.
Commissioner Popkin, we're actually running late here. We need to take our lunch break. I know you have more questions. I'd like to get a sense. I think some of our other commissioners also have questions for Ms. Gillis. So let's go ahead and just take our lunch break, okay. And then once we start the public hearing, maybe we come back and finish up our questions and then get right on the docket.
Sure.
It is 12:09, and the briefing from the Dallas City Planning Commission is now adjourned. Commissioners, there is a Hispanic Heritage event happening in the lobby. If you're interested in running down there, just keep in mind we'll start at 12:30 today. And we are recording. Ms. Bassini, can you please start us off with the roll call?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. District 1. District 1.
Present.
District 2. District 2.
Present.
She is present.
Yes. District 3 vacant. District 4. District 4. District 5. Chair
Present.
District 6.
Present.
District 7?
He's there.
He'll need to be vote.
Commissioner Van, can you hear us, sir?
For the record, Commissioner Van is present. District 8?
Present.
District 9?
District 9 is present.
District 10?
Present.
District 11 vacant. District 12? District 12. District 13?
Present.
District 14? And place 15.
I'm here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Messina. We do, in fact, have a quorum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Dallas City Planning Commission. Today is Thursday, September 15th. It is 12:41 p.m. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. The first one, there are these little yellow slips down here to the bottom right. If you could, we really would like to have a record of your visit with us here today. So at some point today before you leave, we'd really like for you to come down and fill one of these out. You can just leave it right there on that little table to the bottom to your right. Also, our speaker guidelines, each speaker will receive 3 minutes to speak. That includes our speakers online. I will ask all our speakers to please begin your comments with your name and address for the record. In cases where we do have opposition, per our rules, the applicant will receive a 2-minute rebuttal. We do occasionally adjust that timing, and today we have 2 items on the agenda that will receive 1 minute per speaker, and that will be on case number Z 212190 and the West Oak Cliff Area Plan. This meeting is closed caption for those folks that do not speak English. Quick announcement on that. Buenas tardes. Hay subtítulos disponibles para esta junta. Puede prender esta función utilizando el botón marcado CC que está en la parte abajo y a la derecha de su navegador de WebEx. Puede apretar el CC para activar y desactivar la función. Puede escoger su idioma utilizando la flecha desplegable junto al botón. And with that, again, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We will head back to our West Oak Cliff briefing, wrap that up, and then we'll get started back in the docket. And I think Commissioner Popkin had a couple more questions.
I think that was a really great stopping point when we broke for lunch, and I can save the rest of my questions for the hearing.
Perfect. Commissioner Stanner.
Yes, and thank you for all your hard work, too, Commissioner Popkin, on this. Ms. Gillis, I want to dovetail on something that Commissioner Popkin addressed, which has to do with the South Edgefield. And I'm curious because I think it's very important that the community understand processes and, like we try to do in our district, be realistic about what can be done and what can't be done. And we spent a great deal of time discussing the fact that culturally there's a group of people that are unrepresented because they have no HOA. They really don't have an authorized hearing going on in South Edgefield that clearly stated that part of their culture is to have ADUs on their single-family properties and to have extended families living in those. And given that and reading what Commissioner Popkin's motion is, it acknowledges that even though we're saying to them we're hoping it can be recommended that you were able to have those, what would be a process, realistically, of being able to make those conforming for a small area in WOCAP? Or is there?
Existing or new?
Well, existing, for one, because I know there was a lot of concern that we're opening up the door in the discussion to suddenly problems about, you know, code compliance coming out and saying they're non-conforming.
Sure.
So both ways.
I think it's how you write the ordinance. If we proceeded to go through to make accessory dwelling units a permitted use in that area, that the zoning ordinance would have to be written a certain way. And we often write zoning ordinances that say, if it's a legally built structure that was permitted, If for some reason it doesn't fit the new code, or if it doesn't fit new standards, there are ways to write the ordinance that would, if the community chose to go that way, or, if working with staff and attorneys, that we could basically grandfather in existing accessory dwelling units.
And would you do that through an authorized hearing process? Because again, this is a group that doesn't have an organization to
It would take, we would have to go through, yes, we would
authorized.
have to go through a separate zoning process. So an authorized hearing process, a separate zoning process.
But that could be done.
It could be done, yes.
Okay, because otherwise, it's sort of useless to say to people, oh, great, we're going to say, we're hoping to recommend that
Sure.
ADUs, be an acceptable use in your area, but I think we also have to be able to give them a means of getting to that point.
Absolutely. And the plan establishes the first step that says, provides that guidance that says we should do this. And then we have to go through the implementation process, which would be the zoning process, to actually make that happen, which is a whole separate public process and community engagement that would be involved.
I understand that. I just don't want anyone thinking that once this area plan is passed,
correct,
that suddenly ADUs, because that's our recommendation, are conforming structures and this, that, and the other.
Right.
And that they then are contacted and given a way to get to that end. Because I think that was made an important priority in our last meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Skinner. That's an important item to clean up, that this is an area plan, it's a recommendation, it's not creating or changing any zoning. Commissioner Blair.
Going along the same lines of ADUs, will allowing ADUs, whether they are grandfathered in and or the recommendation is made that this particular area of the city is allowed to incorporate ADUs in their housing stock, does that not, and I guess this is more of a, or where's no one in here is from legal. I think it's more of a question for legal. Does that now open the door for other communities to say, well, if WOCAP can have it and we cannot have it, why not? And then they just start building them anyway.
No, because it's not, you need to have an official ordinance that would allow it. It doesn't just because WOCAP, if we wrote an ordinance in a certain way, just because it would be written specifically for a boundary area. And if anybody then tried to do something, and here's the thing, most likely if an accessory dwelling unit was built, there's a lot of circumstances where the zoning has changed over the years, and maybe at one point it was legal, then it's not illegal. There's so many different issues, but no, it doesn't necessarily. It would be highly unlikely that if they're like, oh, well, we'll just do what WOCAP did, that they start building them without it being permitted.
Well, I'm going to ask this one more question, and then I'm going to have to go. If you open the door for ADUs at any portion of the city, and by reading the motion, it doesn't put any parameters around it, you can see a plethora of dwelling units that can be called an ADU just because it's a secondary building unit within a lot, then that also opens the door to have R75 or R5 that is now townhouses, because
There's a specific definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is, and you would have to meet that definition of an accessory dwelling unit. It's not just accessory to a primary structure. It's usually also, you've got height restrictions and square footage restrictions, and some areas have design restrictions and lot coverage. You have to meet certain lot coverage parameters. So it's not just, you can't just, if you're a secondary unit or another unit. That doesn't automatically make you an accessory dwelling unit.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item from our commissioners online? Just let the record reflect that Commissioner Hawk is online. Just one quick little item, and again, just in regards to the ADUs, if the West Oak Cliff area plan were to pass today, it does not make ADUs legal. It would just simply maybe not make a recommendation in regards to a specific area of West Oak Cliff or the entire West Oak Cliff area plan, but there would still be an entire other process, an engagement, public process to go through in order to actually make those legal.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Any last questions, commissioners? Thank you very much, Ms. Gillis.